I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the final Board of Finance, Town of Fairfield Board of Finance budget hearing. Tonight is a public executive session, which means there will be no comments or questions or participation from the crowd. This is for board members only, except if there are specific questions that board members would like asked by various department heads, members of the administration. And of course, the Board of Selectmen as ex officio can come up and join in the discussion. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I think it perfectly fitting on the last night of the budget that we ask two people to do our Pledge of Allegiance, and that would be Mr. Bob Mayer and Mrs. Linda Gardner to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I have a few opening comments before we get started on our voting this evening. And they're notes of thank you. First of all, I'd like to, a budget process is a culmination, or tonight is the culmination of a lot of hard work that begins back in the September and October timeframes for both the town side and the Board of Education side. I'd like to thank First Selectman Tetro for all your hard work and efforts in leading the town side departments in the budget. Thank you for that. Not an easy process with all you have on your plate on a day-to-day basis. I'd also like to thank Dr. David Title for his hard efforts on the Board of Education side, basically balancing the services they would like to provide in the funds that they have available. I'd also like to thank their finance teams. On the town side, Bob Mayer, Linda Gardner, our clerk, Caitlin Bossi, who's ill this evening, and on the Board of Ed side, Doreen Manzel, as well as all the finance staffs on both sides for their hard work and efforts. Having run finance departments myself, this is in addition to your day job, and it doesn't go unnoticed and goes greatly appreciated by the members of this board, as well as I know the Board of Selectmen and the other boards in town. One of the great parts about being on this board and doing these jobs is the opportunity to interact with our fine department heads, and they do a wonderful job for us day in and day out. We typically thank them in significant situations such as storms and things of that nature, and surely they shine there. But day in and day out, these people produce for us. They manage varied and complex issues across the town, and they do it to the best of their ability. So thank you to all the department heads, and also thank you for putting up with us and all our myriad of questions throughout the time. Lastly, I'd like to, well, not lastly, but I would also like to extend our appreciation and our thanks to the public, to your emails, your letters, your phone calls, your documents, your own personal analysis, your public comments, and your attendance at town meetings is all greatly appreciated. Does not go unnoticed, although sometimes they need to go unresponded to just because of sheer volume. But we greatly appreciate it. We also appreciate the fine dialogue that happened last Saturday morning. As you can see, there was really no consensus, and budgets are about balance. They are about priorities. They are about trying to weigh what we can afford versus what we want and what we need. That said, our board does the best we can to balance those needs versus affordability, to balance the services that the townspeople have come to expect versus the costs to provide them. And I want to particularly thank my colleagues on the board. We don't always agree, but we're virtually never disagreeable with each other. We do the best that we can through a lot of hard work, open minds, good humor, and a lot of late nights. And I thank you for your time, your effort, and your service to the town. It's a pleasure to be amongst you and to be counted with you. With that, is there any comments from any other board members before I open this up? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank you as our chairman for keeping us on our path for the last month, allowing the public to have all the time that I think they needed, and to leading us in a very good Saturday session, which I think was very productive.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. That's very kind. Now, I'm going to ask for a motion to put the entire budget before us so that we don't have to do individual motions for each departmental budget. Can I ask for that? I'm going to go, Mr. Brown, do I have a second for that? We'll go with Mr. Stone for that. So the budget as presented by the Board of Selectmen is now before us. And also, Mrs. Gardner, do you have a document of those transfers that you forwarded earlier today? Do you have hard copies? Can you please pass those around so that we can have those? Let's see if we can get this out of the way first. It sounds exceptionally loud this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so this is a document that we received earlier today. You'll notice it's a document of transfers. So it zeroes out, it has no bottom line impact on the budget. But these transfers came up in the course of our budget deliberation, where this board asked for new general ledger chart of accounts. Is that correct, Mrs. Gardner? So those chart of accounts have been put together, and you'll see that the net effect of these transfers, as I said, is zero, but it transfers from one line item to another so that they're called out. The two biggest ones being in the capital side for Public Works. We now have a separate line item for sidewalk repairs. And you'll also notice that, remember, there was a bunch of transfers from IT into the various departments, and those software costs were buried in fees and professional services. We asked for those to be broken out and actually put into information technology lines within those departments, and that's been done. Does anyone have a question on this schedule? Seeing none, can I have a motion to amend the budget by this schedule for these line items? Mr.
Flynn.
Leclerc, do I have a second? Mr. Becker. And Mr. Mayor, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just, you want to make sure you note that the top half, the top third or whatever of the schedule were the transfers requested by the Republican registrar.
Thank you very
Don't
much.
overlook that.
Yes, thank you very much. I remember that from the discussion, I remember. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, all in favor of these transfers? Those opposed, abstentions, those transfers are now done as part of the budget. Thank you very much. Okay, now, for the public, I think, we'll go to the Board of Education side of the budget. I'm going to ask Mr. Tetro to come up for a second. The Board of Selectmen did something I thought unique and creative related to the Board of Education budget with a motion that they put forth, and I'd like Mr. Tetro to step us through that so we can consider doing a sense of the body motion on this item. Mr. Tetro.
This relates to, in the Board of Ed budget, there's $160,000 that was allocated for school security. As part of our board's deliberations, we were looking at the what had taken place in the healthcare line or component of the Internal Service Fund. So we thought that as we're trying to address that, it's something that we can address now. The school security component, which obviously is extremely important, but because the 160 was basically targeted for facilities improvements, it was something we felt we could come back to and include in a larger facilities improvement component later this year as part of a larger non-recurring component that we would put in. That's part of the comprehensive security plan that Chief McNamara, Fire Marshal Bill Kessler, and Superintendent Dave Title are working on. So our proposal, and we realize we have absolutely no authority to do this, we were suggesting to the Board of Ed that they consider this. and indirectly to the Board of Finance, that you consider this also. So that would be a joint recommendation from the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to the Board of Ed. And we thought it would be appropriate for the Board of Ed to commit to moving that $160,000 into the healthcare line to supplement the internal service fund account. Now, again, I was requested by my colleagues to both suggest this to you, but also suggest it to the Board of Ed. We understand the Board of Ed is fully in control of those dollars. And this is a suggestion and not something that we are in control of. But we think it would be best for the town overall if we strengthen that balance sheet account, and it allowed us to come back to that 160 in this school security component, the facilities maintenance piece, and address that at a later time. So the security component gets addressed, and we get a chance to supplement the healthcare component in the internal service fund.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Are there any questions or comments from board members on this? Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tetro. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think we need the school security task force, or whatever we're going to call them, to be in place to fully understand what improvements need to be made. I think we all believe that we need to bolster the medical, and I'd be in favor of supporting this recommendation, which I guess is what it'll come down to the Board of Ed.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? Mr. Walsh.
So if a bonding resolution does not come forward for these infrastructure improvements, then they get to spend the money, the 160, however they so choose. Because that would be outside the agreement.
Yeah, they don't have to listen to this. We literally are suggesting that they do that for the good of the balance sheet, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly if what was planned for that 160 did not come through and the non-recurring component was not approved or delayed too far into the future, they would be able to do that, yes. That was our discussion right on that point. And we said that's kind of, that sounded reasonable to us since we're trying to work together on this, but if we can't put that together on a timely basis, then they should be able to proceed with that.
A timely basis is the 15 budget year, correct?
Correct. That would be between now and June 30th of 15.
Okay, so similar thing is if those bonding resolutions did come forward and you came up with a plan or working with the Board of Education on security, infrastructure improvements, and they didn't pass to town for some bodies for some reason. Similarly, they would be able to use that $160,000 for infrastructure improvements that they saw fit pursuant to their budget, correct?
Correct. Technically, they wouldn't have to make this transfer into the internal service fund until June 30th, 2015. So that gives us, not 18 months, but about 15 months to affect any changes in between. So there's plenty of time. It's not a critical deadline. We should be able to be clear on what we're doing. And again, we wanted to be very public that we weren't trying to, literally, we weren't trying to tell the Board of Ed what to do, but we were asking them to consider doing this in order to strengthen the balance sheet and still meet the school security need.
Okay, and if that was, if it got brought forth to the town bodies, didn't pass, not only would they be able to spend it on that, but we'd still have this hole still in the internal service fund on their medical side.
Well, our board made some additional moves
Yep.
to supplement the hole on that side, and so we tried to do this was for us an additional component of that. We'd made a larger move to address that.
Yes. Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to make a motion for a sense of the body motion, piggyback on the Board of Selectmen's request of the Board of Education to put these funds towards the health insurance accounts, should we move forward with a bonding resolution on infrastructure for school security. Do I have a second to my motion? A second with Mr. DeWitt. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
Mr. Flynn, if I might suggest, perhaps you and I can write a joint letter to the Chair of the Board of Ed, clarifying our suggestion in terms of what we'd like to do and the commitment on this side and their flexibility with how to deal with that.
I'm happy to do so on behalf of my colleagues on the board with you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, at this point, we will move to the largest item which is the Board of Education proposed budget. And as it stands before us now, as adjusted by the Board of Selectmen, that budget is $756,718,051. So that's $156,718,051 is before us as the Board of Education 2015 budget. Mr. Walsh, did I see your hand? I'm sorry.
Yes. I would like to make a transfer of the amount that the Board of Selectmen put in there the other day, the $500,000, from being on the Board of Education side to being on the town side. So while I want to effectuate the same thing to basically increase the town's internal service fund by the exact same amount, I don't believe it's proper that we put it on the Board of Education side for the following reasons. First of all, from what I saw the Board of Education did, the Board of Selectmen did, was I think they had a good idea in trying to solidify the town's internal service fund. But I think by putting it on the Board of Education side skews things incorrectly for a couple of reasons, and therefore I want it put on the town side. First of all, I think it skews it in the fact that by increasing the Board of Education budget by that $500,000, number one, we're requesting really, and we have no control over that the Board of Education actually does that. We have no, because the Board of Education could spend that money any way they wanted to. While I trust that they would do what we wanted them to do, it does a couple of things. Number one, it increases their budget, so next year's budget is going to be skewed by that $500,000. Secondly, this is really town money that's sitting, the way that they wanted to handle this from the Board of Selectmen side was to take this money out of a bond premium that's sitting in a bank account right now and use those funds. So to me, that should really be on the town side. We should just take that money and we should put that in on the town side, maybe even under the workers' comp area, to increase the internal service fund. But we should, I think, always look at the Board of Ed's internal service fund numbers historically to know whether they're hitting their IBNR or not hitting their IBNR. Just like the Board of Ed has, over the last couple of years, they were in the positive on their surplus in that area. And we allowed them to use it to get down to 1 times IBNR. We should always keep track of that, and if they're below that, well, then they should have to make it up. So, for those reasons, I'm making a motion to move the same $500,000, but onto the town side. I think it should be in the workers' comp section on page 110. Yep. Similar to line 58,960. Similar to what we did back in fiscal year 13, where we added $2 million. I'm going to suggest we use the same $500,000 in that line.
Do we have a second to Mr. Walsh's motion? Mr. DeWitt, with the second, and now that motion is before us, the amendment is before us. Questions, comments from board members on the amendment? Ms. Dalman.
Could we hear from the first selectman what the Board of Selectmen's rationale for handling it the way they did was?
Sure.
So that I would like to be able to weigh out the two different positions on this.
Absolutely. He's making his way to the table now. Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
Thank you. We really were, one, trying to address the balance sheet issue, as Mr. Walsh pointed out. We looked at this, it's kind of from a one-town standpoint, and that we realized that the Board of Ed had, through their medical experience this year, had drawn down, or looking towards the June of 2015, the projection is they'll draw it down to about 0 or just under that. And we wanted to specifically address that. Based on discussions with the Chief Fiscal Officer, it seemed to not have an impact whether we went on the town side or the Board of Ed side. And so we felt that it was appropriate to address the Board of Ed side. All right. Mr. Walsh's analysis in terms of the net result of the balance sheet, wherever you put it, is the same. The rating agencies look at the entire internal service fund from a broader standpoint, look at all of our reserves. So it's neutral from their standpoint. We realized we are bringing, in essence, a reserve or money that we had allocated over 3 years, next year being the third year. So we're, in essence, pulling that money into this year. The net result of that is potentially increasing taxes next year, certainly pulling a reserve of $500,000 that we wouldn't have available next year in order to both address the balance sheet this year without raising taxes in this year. This is a non-tax item, so we can do that without impacting the tax rate.
Thank you. Please.
Mr. Tetra, what was the vote of the Board of Selectmen on this item?
Believe it was unanimous, but I'll check with Ms. Gardner to confirm that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from board members on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to call it for a vote. The item before us is to transfer the $500,000 that was added to the Board of Education budget specifically for the insurance reserve accounts, transfer that same $500,000 to the supplemental contribution in the risk management account on the town side, line item 58960, $500,000 transfer from the Board of Education insurance accounts to the town insurance accounts. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 2 opposition? Abstentions? That item carries. Okay. Any other comments on the Board of Education budget? We are still on the Board of Education budget as amended. That budget now sits before us at $156,218,051. Please make sure my math is right. I would hate to give the wrong number out. Any other questions, comments on the Board of Education budget? We'll go to Mr. Walsh.
I'm making a motion to reduce the budget by $250,000.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion? Anybody? There's no second on that motion right now.
All right, no one wants to reduce it.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or anything on this budget? Okay, the budget is before us at $156,218,051. That is before us right now. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm going to go as opposed.
Okay, Mr. Walsh opposes. That line item passes the budget. Before we move on, I do want to say we are hopeful that the Board of Education will continue to diligently manage their budget as they've tried to do this past year. There is risk in that budget. We are aware of it. We saw it this year on two fronts. Number one, the special education front, and number two, and most concerningly, is the IBNR, or the insurance reserves. Those reserves need to be monitored on, if not a monthly, a bi-monthly basis, and we can't run that aground on that side. And we're hopeful that our colleagues on the Board of Education and Dr. Title, you will specifically update us on that repeatedly through the year and make the necessary adjustments within your budget as required to handle that. Any other comments on the Board of Education budget before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we're going to turn it over to the revenue side of the house. The revenue side of the house. Okay, do we have a page number in the budget book? 49. Obviously, the tax rate gets set, the mill rate gets set after we are done with the budget. So are there any other adjustments on other revenue line items within this budget? We'll go to Mr. Walsh.
I'm making a motion to increase the police alarm ordinance by $4,800. It's line number 42207. I'm on page 44, that's where I had it.
Thank you,
It's
Mr.
under-
Walsh.
It's under fines.
Yeah.
Page 44, line 42207, to increase the line by $4,800 to make it $24,800, which is similar to the year before, which, when I queried Deputy Chief Liddy, he said he'd be comfortable with that number.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Brown will go with the second. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns on that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call that for a vote. All in favor of increasing line item, I'm going to make sure I get the right one here. 1,442,2207 by $4,800 to $24,800. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that item carries. Before we leave revenue, Mr. Mayor, do we have any update on other revenue line items, particularly as it relates to conveyance or any of those items that we should be aware of?
Not really. We get constant updates from the CCMRE, the government grants, but they're still in line with what's in the budget, and there's no new news.
So there's no, is there any new news on any other revenue line items related to the budget? Does anybody have any questions on any other revenue line items? We'll go to Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Mayor, on the premium bonds sold, you have zero, or the administration has zero in there right now. Page 46, line 48,100. Bond premium. How much bonds do you anticipate selling in July?
It's two comments. One, that's not a revenue item. In the past, I know it has been recorded as a revenue item, but it's not a revenue item. It's a contra expense item. So it doesn't belong in revenue.
Why is it there?
It's not revenue. It's not like,
All right, what he's saying is it's a change in accounting. In 2013, it was there. When he took over as the chief fiscal officer, they netted it against debt expense, correct?
correct.
Okay. Well, what do you anticipate being your, how many bonds do you expect, what's the amount of bonds you expect to sell in July?
I think we have, we won't know until we start working with it, which will start about the day after the budget finishes. But I think the capital plan is about $20 or $22 million.
$20 to $22 million? Do you expect to get any premium on bonds out of, on the sale?
When interest rates
Yeah.
are extremely low, there is a greater likelihood of receiving bond premium than when interest rates are more normative. If I had to bet, I would say yes. I would not want to pick a number.
And based on the amounts that because bonds have been low for the last couple of years, correct?
Interest rates have been low, yes.
Yeah, interest rates have been low, and we've gotten at least fiscal year 11, 250,000.
That's the amortization, though. That's not the actual result of the bond premium
Yeah,
from
the
that
bond,
year.
the only bond premium that I specifically know the number of is the one, like 2 years ago, which was 2.9 million. I don't know, I don't have a recollection or involvement with the history.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Sure.
Of that, on that 2.9 million, what was the total amount of bonds floated that year?
Was that 30?
Do you remember? Because I don't remember off the top.
I'm a little bit speculative here, but I think combining the bands and the bonds, I think it was like 37 million?
How much?
37 million?
37 million. So it
I think
was,
so, a combination of the two.
right. Right. Okay,
I have no further questions.
great. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or concerns on revenue? Seeing none, I'm going to accept out tax revenue, which we'll do obviously after the RTM votes. But if there's no other revenue adjustments, I'd like to call for a vote on revenue. Okay, all in favor of approving the revenue in this budget, other than the tax revenue, which we'll vote on after? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we're done with revenue then. Thank you. Now we'll go to departmental expenses, and we'll go right down the list, I hope. Mrs. Gardner, is this list in the same order as the book? Okay. So I'll call off a department. I'll wait for any adjustments to that department. We'll do any amendments, and then we'll vote on the department. Mrs. Gardner, if you could help me with dollar amounts for the departments.
Mrs. Gardner, do you have any extra copies for us for, no? Of the,
Where are we starting?
it's okay.
Okay, can we, possible that we could take a 5-minute recess and get copies of this? Yeah, not a problem. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess and just get copies of this, and then we'll move forward. Good evening. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Now that we have the schedule, what we have before us is called a control sheet appropriation by departments. This budget book has the budget in it as proposed by the first selectman. This control sheet takes that budget, adds in the adjustments that were made just about 48 or 50 hours ago by the Board of Selectmen. So this is the revised budget that's before us. So I'll be working off of this schedule for our purposes. So before us right now is the first selectman's office budget. It's $458,236,000 is approved by the Board of Selectmen. That item is before us. Any questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Those opposed, abstentions. Okay. Item carries. Next budget before us is 1030, the town clerk, 527,263. Questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, that item carries. Next item is Budget 1050, Administrative Services, $100,610. Questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, that item carries. Next item is 1070, the Registrar of Voters, and I'm going to turn to Mrs. Gardner on this one. This was adjusted by, was this adjusted by the department, or was that contingency, did that stay within the department? It stays within the department, correct?
No, you voted transfers out
Out of the department?
of the department.
Okay,
Let
so
me tell you what
give me
that
the new
was.
number. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do here.
Got it.
Thank you. You recall just earlier, we did the transfer, and I wanted to make sure I have the right number in front of me. I think it comes down by 32,480?
Yes, yes, it's the number by, it's reduced by 32,480.
Okay, so can we quickly do that math?
Sure. $226,346.
226,346? Thank you very much, Mrs. Gardner. So this budget is now 226,346 is before us. Questions, comments on this budget? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That budget carries as amended. Zoning Board of Appeals, Department 1090.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be recusing myself from 1090, 1110, 1130, 1210, and 1230. I'll be waiting outside. Just let me know when you're done.
Okay. We might, Rabbit, we might. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Zoning Board of Appeals, 1090 is before us, 4,938. Questions, comments on this budget? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? This budget carries. Town Planning and Zoning, 1110 This budget is before us at 578,721. Questions, comments on this budget? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Probate Court, 1130, 31,200. This is 31,200. Questions, comments, concerns on this budget? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Historic District Commission, 1210. This budget is 11,863. 11,863. Questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That line item carries. Conservation Commission, 1230. This budget is 932,328 as before us. 932,328. Questions, comments? We'll go to Mr. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go to capital outlays. If we can go to page 100.
Page 100 in our budget
100
books.
in your budget books. And this would be line 57000. I'd like to reduce that budget by $16,200, which would be the Ford Escape.
So you're taking out the purchase of a Ford Escape SUV for $16,200. Do I have a second to that motion? Mr. DeWitt, that motion is now before us, adjusting this budget by $16,200. Questions, Mrs.?
Can I ask
Albin.
through the chair to Mr. Brown your rationale for removing that?
Sure. One thing I'd like to see is a inventory of all the vehicles the town has. The types, what departments have them, who drives them. And we do know that on top of that, we do know that we get 10 police cars every single year. And once those purchases are made, these police cars, they either get sold or passed down to different departments. I'd like to see this department take a look throughout the town, see what vehicles may be available, and utilize one of those vehicles.
Ms. Albin, please.
I'm trying to recall the presentation from that department, and I don't know who would be here to answer that question as to why they were requesting this car. Is there somebody here? And if no one else, I guess we'd have to ask the first selectman. Mr. Brown, I don't disagree with your thoughts of having an inventory. I just want to be sure, before I vote on this, that we're not talking about, as we learned last year, we had some cars that were quite old in various departments of Public Works, and we didn't fund the money to even, I think, replace or repair them last year. So I want to just know the particulars on this item.
Can you give me the page, please, for this?
Sure, it's page 100, and it's Department 1230 Conservation, and it's the 2014 Ford Escape. You had already reduced the departmental request once, Mr. Tetra.
All right, if you read the description here, this is going to replace an existing 1996 car that's almost 20 years old. It's a Chevrolet Tahoe 4x4, which we typically don't have in our police department inventory as we bring in new cars. It's got 140,000 miles on it, and it's in poor condition. It was received as a turn-in from the fire department. The Ford Escape is a lighter vehicle, and it'd be used by a supervisor or the open space manager. So what they're really trying to do is replace a 20-year-old car that was used when they got it.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra.
So in terms of, we can put together a schedule of all the vehicles, and however, that's not going to change the mileage or the age of this vehicle in terms of replacement.
Mr. Stone had a question.
Mr. Stone?
I'm just a little confused. It was an original for 26,200, and you cut it to 16,200. So is that a used car?
Correct.
So it's not, so it's no longer a 214 Escape, it's something else?
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to point out that the department still will get the 2014 Chevy with the extended cab for $27,195. So my motion stands
Just
to reduce the Ford Escape.
Thank you.
to help clarify, you'll notice that what was requested was $37,000. We asked them to go find a used vehicle in that regard also. Looking at the first few years of any car is when you have the biggest drop-off. So we've basically gone back and tried to make these requests more cost-effective going through. But the function of the 4x4 pickup is not the same as the function by the Ford SUV.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Mr. Becker?
Yeah, just, I'll be in support of this. This is something we've done this in the past with moving vehicles from other departments. They're actually correct that the police department now is not using Tahoes or anything of that size, but they are using Explorers, which are actually even bigger than an Escape. And if they wanted to replace it with the same size, there may be within the fire department fleet as they move from front to second and downstream, similar to as in the past. I do feel that we've been acquiring actually more SUVs overall, which gives them an even greater opportunity within the next year to actually get something. And for it to be not even a used vehicle, I actually like the idea of it coming from within our fleet, so we know the history from the very beginning of that vehicle. So I will be in support of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Any other questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor of amending the Conservation Commission budget by reducing it by $16,200 by item number 2 under capital improvements, the Ford Escape, $16,200. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. So the Conservation Commission budget is now before us as adjusted. Mrs. Gardner, can you help me?
916128.
916128. So 916128 is the new budget. Questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Okay, the Shellfish Commission, $1250. $8,315 is this budget. Questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. I'm sorry, Mrs. Albert, I want to make sure I got that. You favor. Thanks. 7-0. Yep. Yes, actually, can we bring him in? He missed the shellfish debate. There he is. I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, I was remiss.
Shellfish.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. My apologies on that.
Even worse.
Okay. Line item 1270, legal services. This budget is $500,000. You can stay and recuse yourself. $500,000? We're just playing with you, Mr. Walsh. Any questions, comments on the legal services budget? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Legal services passes. And now Mr. Walsh may be able to come back in yet again. Okay. Okay. Now we'll go to town planning and zoning. I'm only kidding. Just wanted to see if it'd leave again. All right. We're actually in miscellaneous contingency, item number 1290, and this is $45,000, item number 1290, miscellaneous contingency. Questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That carries unanimously. Next item is Human Resources, 1330. This budget is $14,762,593, and remember, this carries a lot of the insurance costs for the town, and health and hypertension and all of that. That's why that,
It's modified.
it's modified.
500,000.
Yeah,
It's 15,262,593.
15,262.
593.
593, thank you, you beat me to that, I was just going to ask that new number. So now that budget number is 15,262, 593. That is a result of the earlier transfer of $500,000 from the Board of Education budget. Questions? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Everybody's in favor, that item carries. Okay, we'll go to Budget 1350, Community and Economic Development. This budget is $198,600. That item is before us now. Anyone? Seeing nothing, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Next one is Harbor Management Commission. Item 1370, that's for $24,260. Any questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Okay, we're done with the General Governmental Administrative section. Now we'll go to General Government Miscellaneous. Okay. We're going to start with item number 2010, which is contingency. 2010, and the item here is $2,307,483. That's $2,307,483.
Mr. Chairman, that was adjusted as well for the transfer from the Registrar of Voters.
Thank
The
you.
new number is 2,339,963.
963. Thank you very much, Mrs. Gardner. And seeing no other comments, I have a motion on this one. And I want to be careful the way I discuss this. Due to the confidentiality of some of this, this has to do with litigation, has to do with negotiation, advice of counsel, and the way we generally manage contingency reserves for the town that are typically done behind closed doors for obvious reasons. With that in mind, I'd like to commend the administration for moving forward on our contingency here, for strengthening our balance sheet in this area, and being good stewards on this line item. With that in mind, I think we do have some flexibility here to help coordinate the tax rate. So I would like to make a motion to reduce this contingency account by $286,000, which is roughly 1/10 of a mil, or 1/10 of a percent of the budget, rather. It's $286,000. So that would be my motion. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Walsh. And now that item is open for discussion. And I'm happy to discuss this, but I will be careful in the way we discuss it in a public forum. Any comments, questions from anyone? Okay, seeing none. Oh, please, Mrs. Alman.
Would it be necessary to go into executive session in order for you to
Private
be-
executive session?
candid in explaining it to the members of this body?
Sure. Do I have a second to go into private executive session? Mr. Stone, all in favor of private executive session? Opposed? Abstentions? Let's go out back for a few minutes, and we can discuss it. Can I have a motion to bring us back out of private executive session? Mr. Stone, seconded by Mrs. Alban. All in favor? Okay, so we're back in public executive session. Thank you, everybody. What is the new item? What's the new number before us, just to make sure I have the right one? Well, okay, I'm sorry. So, wait, I got to do the amendment first. So the item is to reduce the contingency by $286,000. Any other questions, comments on this? Mr. Stone?
I'm against this because there's just, as I look at past years and what we've encountered, and you know, you just never know what's going to come up. And whether there's a storm or a hurricane or a fire, I just don't know. And that's why you have a contingency. And I'm not in favor of cutting this anymore. A couple of years ago, when the RTM cut it, we all walked out. You know, the whole Board of Finance walked out, and I don't think this board should be cutting the contingency. So I'm in favor of leaving it as is.
Thank you. We will note, just for the record, that this, the balance in this account is much larger than it was back in that day. But your point is well noted.
That's because we've worked on it.
Any other questions? Mr. Becker?
Yeah, I'll be in favor. I do think it's really a modest reduction. I think it will leave us in an okay position. And I think even with what the town faced this past year, we have, and to the First Selectman's credit, been able to manage a lot of that through adjustments within the budget so far. And I think that's an initial step, and I think we'll be okay as a town. I'm comfortable.
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Stone's right, that, yes, we did work on it, but that's why we have some room now. It's a balance sheet item. It's on the Board of Finance to protect the balance sheet items. And with this reduction, we're still protecting the contingency.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I think go right ahead.
Yeah, I understand that, but all these departments are bare bones right now. And if we, we might need this money, because these departments are so bare bones, there's no room to play. So that's just my final comment on that.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Well, I hear that. I also don't want to overtax our taxpayer. And I think to put extra money in an area that we've been building up over time, we have reserves in other areas. This board has been extremely conservative on all of its budgeting. And I believe that I'm trying to save the taxpayers' money. I'm trying to drive this budget down. And that's what I'd like to do. And unless we start going someplace, it's not going down.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so the item is before us to reduce the contingency gap by $286,000. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That line item carries, and now the contingency account is in front of us as amended.
$2,053,520.
$2,053,963.
I'm sorry, 963. I'm sorry.
$2,053,963. That item is before us. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Now, contribution to surplus.
611, was it?
I'm sorry, I thought it was 6.
No, it was 6-2.
6-2.
Sorry.
Contribution to surplus, 2020. So this is an additional $500,000 that we are setting aside to increase our surplus. Questions, comments? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? This item carries. Okay. Regional Youth Adult Social Action, 2073, $15,000. Questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, item carries. 2030, the Pequot Library. This budget is before us at $325,000. Mr. Walsh?
I'd like to make a motion to increase this budget by $25,000 that the first selectman cut from it.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Becker? It's an increase of $25,000. Questions, comments on the amendment? Mr. Stone?
Obviously, we went through this last year, but the cut of $25,000, while it might be a bigger percentage from the 350, it's really only about a 2% cut to their entire budget. And with everyone else struggling to keep their budgets even or less or whatever, I don't think that that's so terrible. And I appreciate the work that the Pequot Library does, but I think that the $325 is a fair amount for the town to pay, considering we do have two other libraries.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Yes, Mr. Walsh, you want to explain?
I struggled with this, and I thought we went through this whole thing last year in a very difficult thing to watch us go through this whole thing and watch Pequot Library get defunded and having to go through all the town bodies and the RTM having to restore the money. The bottom line is that the only nonprofit here that has been touched is one, and I thought we weren't going to single people out, but here we go, we did. And everybody else pretty much stayed exactly what they were going to get last year. Sullivan McKinney got a little bit more because of an issue they were having, I think, with an elevator, and I'm fine with that. But the bottom line is that we can't be hand-selecting different charities that we selectively increase or decrease just because we like them or we don't like them or whatever. And I was hoping we'd get past this after last year, but we haven't. So I'd like the money to be restored. I thought about going the other way, Bob. I thought about the other methodology, and if you're fine with this, and everybody's fine with it, and I'll even listen to Mike, I thought about like reducing everybody, all the nonprofits, by the exact same amount.
Same percentage?
Same percentage. So they were reduced by 7.5%. And I'll ask the first selectman how he feels about that. Because I'm willing to do that as well, if everyone feels better going that direction. But I just thought that some of these nonprofits, after hearing them, were so on the edge and needing some of this money that I just thought it'd be better just to restore Pequot than to sit here and take the 7.5% from Pequot and then me go through each one of these 18 line items or so on each one of these nonprofits that we fund and take 7.5% off each one of them. But if I could be convinced to go the other direction with it.
Yeah, from the top. I want to be absolutely clear. I interviewed each of these companies and each of these organizations. This is not about liking somebody or not liking somebody, and frankly, I resent that inference, Mr. Walsh. Practically speaking, I sat down with each of these. We had a system. We sat down and looked at each one to make sure that Fairfield was getting their money back for their investment. Pequot is a valuable part of our town because of all the hullabaloo last year. We never really addressed the actual amount we should address. And Mr. Walsh, that's where I agree with him. Because it was cut to zero, we spent all of our time arguing over how to get it back, what's going on. There was a lot of motion. But we went back and cut the Fairfield Public Libraries, our investment in libraries, last year. This past month, in order to make up for the special ed shortfall, we cut our library again. We're asking the public libraries to contribute to helping us keep the tax increase down. It seemed fair to ask Pequot to do a little bit of the same. None of these is easy. I value Pequot. I voted for the full funding last year. But as has been pointed out at this table, you can't get the tax rate down without taking a little bit from different areas. This was one I felt that could handle it better than others. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Any other questions, comments on this? Mr. Walsh?
Well, Chris, you can go first.
Mr. DeWitt.
Chris, he had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having been on the vote, one of the initiators of the vote to zero out Pequot Library last year, and also having been, or still the not-for-profit committee, right, chairman. I've gone this last year realizing that we need to have a process in place, which of course we've briefed you ad nauseum. We've talked about it this budget season. I don't disagree with your comments about we took down the library 7%, but I have to say that when we were looking for money to counter the Board of Ed shortfall, and you said, have any recommendations? One of my recommendations was, because we had not paid two of the not-for-profits the full amount, it was, let's take some money out of there. One of those was Pequot. So I'll be honest, I said, let's cut some out of there. So there was the opportunity to take 7.5% out of Pequot this year. You opted not to do that. I am in favor of restoring this money this year. I am also in favor of, and I've said in many years, that starting next year, once again, we need to have a process in place, and we need to ask our not-for-profits to come with a budget that we can live with and possibly reduce. Thank you.
Mr. Tetra?
Just to clarify, when we were looking for funding for the shortfall for special ed, you suggested both Fairfield Counseling Services and Pequot Library as places to cut. Cutting them in the last quarter, when they were geared up and at that run rate, would have been more devastating. And that was one of the things we tried to avoid even in town departments in terms of what we cut off. We basically went and looked at people we hadn't hired, we looked at some capital projects we put off, that type of thing. To go back to organizations that we made a commitment to at that point in the year would have been much more traumatic than what's taken place. This is about a budget approval where they have time to plan for it, and as Mr. Stone pointed out, represents less than 2% of the current budget.
Whether you believe it or not, I believe our budget is a commitment to all our department heads. So we did go to the library and said, cut that department. So we asked them to cut, your words this budget season, there's a hole in the roof. We had a patch somewhere. Everyone can give a little bit. We opted not to go there.
Correct.
Any other questions, comments on this? Mr. Walsh?
Well, I just believe the Pequot Library delivers a product, a second branch library to the town for a cost to us of what I'd like to see to be $350. The first selectman wants to be $325. I was hoping this year that we'd asked last year that we get a breakout of our branch library from the library so we can compare apples to apples. We did not get that. Hopefully the Budget Committee will demand it this year, and we'll be able to see how the $4 million pie for the libraries is split up between the main library and the branch library. But at $1.2 million operational cost for Pequot Library, it seems like a pretty good bargain. I believe every dollar for them is precious. I think the money should be restored, although if the first selectman's pleasure, if you think that I should just reduce the other, I'll equalize it. If you think that's a better methodology to go down, then I will cut the other nonprofits 7.5% and give Pequot enough so that, we could just cut everybody 5%.
As I mentioned, I sat down and interviewed each of these and looked at and analyzed each of the services that they're providing the town and our residents, whether we could duplicate those, and whether we could provide a cheaper alternative in terms of providing those. No, it doesn't. Cutting across the board is not a good management technique, and I'm not quite sure why you would offer that as a choice here. The idea of I'll hurt everybody instead of one person, if that's your philosophy, just doesn't seem to make sense. We ought to be able to talk about whether you believe in what the investment you want to make in Pequot is. We should be able to discuss that. Threatening other not-for-profits in that process doesn't really, I think, provide a productive discussion, and scaring them with cuts, and especially an across-the-board cut, which really has no logic or no rationale, I think is just not a good discussion to have.
I'm not trying to scare anybody. We're about to make cuts here or not make cuts here. You could say that I know that you had meetings with all of them. The bottom line is that none of them changed, except for you increased Sullivan McKinney, and every other number stayed the same as last year.
There were two other requests.
There were two others that asked for more, which anybody can ask for more, but the exact same numbers after all those interviews and what their needs were, everybody stayed the exact same. Out of it, like 18 of them, everyone stayed the exact same. So not one need changed amongst all of them, except for one, the largest one. So my motion stands. I don't want to get into the picking of who we want right now. I think we need to come up with a better methodology, but we don't have it before us right now. I'd like to see them all equalized, so to what we've been doing before.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Mrs. Albin?
Through the chair, a question to Mr. Walsh. If you restore the 25,000 and you're attempting to reduce the tax impact on the taxpayers, how will you pay for it?
Well, some of it I've already found in that I increased the income in the fire line that you voted on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was about $5,000. And I've got a couple more savings that I'm going to be coming to tonight to pay for it, actually. So
Okay.
I'll be presenting them tonight.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, the amendment is before us. Mr. Becker?
Briefly, I mean, I think it's pretty well known my opinions on nonprofits. I would just note in regards to the overall library budget is always been trending up. This line, like many nonprofits, has been actually came down a few years ago and has been remaining flat, while inflationary costs for the library have certainly been going up. So I think they've been doing an excellent job of holding to that 350. On our end, I think our library is doing an excellent job of trying to manage the costs, but they are getting money for their employment costs and other inflationary costs along the line. So I'm certainly in favor of doing this, and believe that we are going to find some savings in other parts of the budget to ultimately be able to save the taxpayers money. And I do think our partnership with Pequot does ultimately save the taxpayers money as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, the amendment is before us to increase the funding to Pequot Library by $25,000. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The item carries. Okay, the Pequot Library funding is now before us at an amended amount of $350,000. Anybody on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Item carries. Okay, in the efforts of time, I'm going to read off a bunch of the smaller lines as opposed to calling for a vote on each individual. If somebody has an amendment or a comment to make, please make it. And if not, then we'll vote on them en masse. Okay? So we'll do this for Fairfield Counseling Services, $175,000. This is actually a big one. Maybe that wasn't the one to start with. So we'll vote on this one separately. $175,000. Anybody? Okay. Anybody? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Let's go to the next page. 2070 Discovery Museum, $24,000. Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, $18,053. Audubon Society, $15,000. Greater Bridgeport Transit Authority, $30,000. Fairfield Museum and History Center, $50,000. Fairfield Veterans Advisory and Info Service, $3,420. Southwestern Connecticut EMS Council, $3,000. Southwestern Regional Mental Health Board, $9,475. Southwestern Regional Communications Center has been zeroed out. Council of Churches Janus Fund, $5,000. Grassmere by the Sea, $65,000. Sullivan McKinney Elder Housing, $11,783. Fairfield Arts Center zeroed out. The Connecticut. The Kennedy Center, $7,000. Mill River Wetland Committee, $5,000. Pilot House, $8,000. And the Center for Family Justice, $6,100. Does anybody have any adjustments on those items?
If it would be possible to do Sullivan McKinney separately, as I'm going to abstain on that one.
Okay. Let's do Sullivan McKinney. I think you're on the board of that, correct?
Correct. I am on the board.
Okay.
I avoid the conversation regarding this, but I think it's...
Okay, so
best
let's
to
vote on
abstain.
that one first, and then we'll vote on the remaining, and Mr. Becker will abstain from that vote. Any questions on Sullivan McKinney Elder Housing? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And Mr. Becker abstains. And now the other items are before us. Okay. I'm going to call for a vote on all of them en masse. So all in favor of approving all of those budgets, the stated amounts? Opposed? Abstentions? Those items all carry. Before we move on, I think, first of all, thank you for the discussion. Mr. Tetra, thank you for coming up to the table on that discussion. I think it does prove once again that the work in this not-for-profit area, it's very emotional, it's very passionate on both sides of these issues. And I think it proves that our work there is not done. I think the issue has to do with transparency and what the process is. And I know Mr. Tetra, from having served with him on this board for a long period of time, he's a process guy. And our hope is that we can actually bring a process to this that will allow us to really deal with these en masse, understanding that all of them do provide great services. And I'd like to echo something that Mr. Becker said. these public-private partnerships, and they are our partners, are very valuable because in many instances, they provide services to townspeople at lower cost than what we would be able to provide ourselves. And those are partnerships worth facilitating, worth growing, worth nurturing, but also worth monitoring and worth understanding and worth making sure that we get our money's worth and that we just don't continue to do the same thing year after year after year. And I think the frustration that we've had collectively, and not just our board but other boards, is really driving that transparency, driving that process, treating them all fairly, but making sure that we're getting our taxpayers' money's worth from each of them. So I supported Mr. Walsh's motion. I know many others did as well, largely because I'm looking for that transparency, largely because I'm looking for that process. I think they all do great work, and I'd like to see us continue, and in some ways maybe expand it where it makes sense to use taxpayers' money. So I don't know if anybody else has a comment on this section of the budget. If not, we can move on, but I just wanted to go on the record with that. So, thank you. The next item we have is private school transportation, which is 2531, and that's a budget of $1,401,805. $1,401,805. Do we have any questions or comments on that budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? Okay. The next budget is 11030, Health and Welfare Services. It's $136,647 is that budget as it stands before us. Questions, comments on this budget? What page is this in the budget book? I can never... 269? Thank you.
Health and Welfare Services?
Yeah.
174.
Okay, it was the wrong one, okay. Thank you very much. You memorized all these, didn't you, Bob? I live with this. Yeah. Sleep with it under your pillow. Okay, do we have any questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on this item. All in favor of Health and Welfare Services budget of $136,647. Those opposed, abstentions, that item carries. So that section of the budget is now complete as well. Okay. We're going into the finance area of the budget. So we're going to do Finance Department, 3010. That budget is now before us at $857,730. That's $857,730 Finance Department budget. Mrs. Leclerc.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to decrease this budget by 35,000, I think it's 507, to remove the line 51031, the part-time payroll, which is a new request. And I feel a little bit bad about it because I think the department could use this position, but we really have to try to hold the line by keeping our staffing the same. And the one piece to that is that I do think that in the future I would like to see a grant writer and someone to track the grants. But right now, it was a little unclear as to what the person that's actually in the budget now would do. And so I am making that motion to remove that.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. DeWitt. Conversation on that motion. Mr. Stone.
Could I ask Mr. Mayor one more time what that position will be doing?
First of all, it's not a position. It's a bank of hours that would be used to deploy for several items. One, build a, 5-year financial plan model, probably be the top priority. 2, relieve some time for the internal auditor, so maybe be able to complete more internal audits. 3, relieve some of the time pressure and the long hours during the budget season. 4, hopefully probably allow some time to develop town cash flow statements to optimize investment returns. Those would be the top 4 or 5.
One of the things that came out of Saturday's session that I heard a lot was about strategic planning. And I assume this position would help you do that.
I assume the 5-year plan would be an instrumental part of that process, would be required to that process, actually.
Because of that, mainly, I think this position, or these hours should be put in there. This is a town with a huge budget, and obviously we're trying to cut tax rates, but I don't think we should be cutting corners, and especially in the finance department. So I'm adamantly opposed to this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Walsh?
This is First Selectman. When you presented this at your plan, you said that this was going to be also used and we needed it because of the audit for a grant accountant, and that's not one of the jobs I just heard. I thought we were going to be getting, this position was going to be used for grant accounting, and that's not one of the things that was just listed.
The original request from the finance department was for a full body. Full body would allow us to do all the things I mentioned, plus grant accounting, I believe. Half a position or a quarter of a position, if you chose to cut half of this instead of all of this, would be selective projects.
So grant accounting's out.
At this level, yes.
Any other comments on this item? So here's my comments on this item. So I want to respond to Mr. Stone's comments. Strategic planning isn't done at a staff accountant level. Strategic planning isn't done at $35,000 a year. Strategic planning is done by the CEO and the CFO, and by the department heads, by the people running the individual departments. $35,000 isn't going to get that done. Now, could it help do some spreadsheet crunching? Perhaps it could. Perhaps it could. What concerns me about this is the way it was necessarily presented. And by the way, I think the finance department's working really, really hard. And they're doing a very good job with limited resources at this current point in time. I do want to call that out. I want to commend Mr. Mayor on that. I want to commend his team on that. But I'd like to see the job description of what this job is. I'd like to see exactly what role this plays. I'd like to see exactly what level it has. In other words, if we're going to do this right. Throwing money at a problem and saying, well, they're going to do all these things, that doesn't solve the problem. That just creates more clutter. Actually, putting together the job description, giving somebody the responsibility and saying this is their responsibility, and then holding them accountable for it is the way you solve this. And I'll tell you right now, it doesn't get done for $35,000 at that level.
No, but it does relieve some of the pressure on Mr. Mayor, so he has more time to work on this. And, I still say we're cutting corners in a really important thing, and if we hold this off for another year, then the strategic plan gets pushed back another year possibly.
I totally reject that premise 100%. Having done strategic planning, having run finance departments, $35,000 a year head, whether it's a temp head, part-time head, full-time head, does not impact your strategic planning. Does not.
Well, can't help it.
If you're relying on a $35,000 a year person to do your strategic planning, you got much bigger problems.
You want to put more money into it then?
Not right now, not until I see a plan to get it done. I don't throw money at problems without a plan. Any other questions, comments on this item? Oh, Mrs. Alban, please.
Through the chair to Mr. Mayor, if this is removed from the budget, what will your department do to manage the workload that you have? I mean, how will this affect your department if you don't receive the funds for this staffing?
Well, we will continue to do our duty to guard our country and our town. No question about that. Back in my old corporate days, when I used to get some positive write-ups like Barron's and Forbes, for some turnaround successes in the corporate world, in the public corporate world, the financial and operational effectiveness of the work that was done was pretty much what was commented on. It was thinking, creating, managing, and delivering. It wasn't pushing numbers on a keyboard.
Yep.
So Mr. Flynn is correct in his comments about this position does not do your strategic planning. He's absolutely correct. What this position does, and I think I was pretty clear, there is a plan. The plan is to engage different people at different times for specific project work. If the original request for a full person, a full body, a full FTE was in the budget, then there would be a job description, etc. But this is not a full-time person. This is not one half-time person. This is a bank of hours. To use Mr. DeWitt's term when he said he would support this, it's a utility infielder. It's seasonal employment. So that's what it is. What we will do, we will continue to do our best. We will continue to, work to put in to put things together. We will continue to move things around, and we'll do our best to get what is done and respond to the town governing bodies.
And pardon me, I'll ask you to repeat, what are the first items of work that you would have addressed with these staff hours?
We focus on a 5-year financial plan, not a strategic plan. Relieve some time from the current internal auditor to do more internal audit. Relieve time during the budget process. Possibly develop town cash flow projections. Those are the top 4.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I also, just responding, I do want to commend the entire finance team. And Mr. Mayor, I want to commend you. So it's not a,
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate it. And so does the department. I'll pass them on.
sincerely meant. Mr. Brown.
Just one quick point. I think this is a conversation that doesn't end. It continues shortly after this budget season, because it is an important topic. We are talking about long-term planning. I think what we're saying is, let's just get something more definite and defined and start this process as soon as possible. Not wait until next February, next March. Thank you.
So we have Mrs. Leclerc's motion for a reduction of 35,507 in the accounts that she recommended in the finance department. And other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of this adjustment? All opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Can we have the new number? Thank you, Ms. Skerner.
822-223.
Okay, so the new finance department number of 822-223 is now before us. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of this budget? All opposed? Abstentions? This item is done. Okay, we'll go to the purchasing department. I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. Purchasing Department, any questions, comments on this budget? As it stands at, let me find my place here, $246,620. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Let's go. You need one here. What's the next one? Okay, to the assessor. Stands at $1,014,576. Any questions, comments on this budget? Mrs. Leclerc?
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to move the, from the professional fees and services line 53,200, the amount of 317,200, and at the, at the same time, I was going to make a motion to reduce that line by 50,000.
Do you want to take one first?
Should I, okay.
Okay.
All right, so
Take the
let's.
50,000 first?
So
Mr.
we'll do
Brown,
the
can Mary cite the page?
Sure, it's page 187.
Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Leclerc, let's take one
Okay,
motion. The first
and
motion?
Right now, it's my understanding for the 50,000 that it's still an estimate and that part of the expense will be in next year's budget as well. And so I'm just really deferring until we have better information what the full cost will be.
Do I have a second? Mr. Becker?
Could I
Any-
have the number on that motion again, please, Mary?
50,000 we're doing first.
All right, any questions, comments on the motion to reduce the assessor's budget by $50,000? Okay, ready to vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Mr. Leclerc, you have another motion?
Okay, the second half of my motion is to move the 317,200, which is the remaining cost in that line for the reassessment. And again, it's because we still don't have a lot of information. I know we did get an email today for part of the answer to our question, but I was unable to open it. So the attachment didn't work. So for now, we just want to move it to contingency until we have better information.
Yes. Do we want to move 317 or 267,200 as the amended number? Because that is the amended number, right, Linda? So we took 317,200 and reduced it by 50, so that's 267,200.
No.
No, I think
The
it's-
317.
It's 317,200,
Yeah.
great.
Do we have a second to Mrs. Leclerc's motion? Second it. Mr. Walsh, I know you were able to read the document, so please.
I did read the document. I read the legal opinion by Attorney Lesser, although that answered one small question of all the questions that we were asking. And I think we need a better understanding, and we need a full presentation by the town attorney at a Board of Finance meeting of exactly what our role is. And I would include a review of all the Board of Finance statutes for the state of Connecticut under the general statutes, not just the one provision he addressed that's in the town charter in regards to the mechanisms that we're supposed to supply and things like that. So I think this is a broader conversation so that we more fully understand our role. I'm not saying that his legal opinion in regards to that one specific question was not correct at all. So I just want to be clear about that Mr. Ross may have the authority to fully choose who the person who does the revaluation of the company and things like that. But I think as we head into this process, we need a full presentation, and Mr. Ross should probably be present as well, so that we're all under the full understanding of how this is going forward and what this Board of Finance's role is in that process.
Mr. Mayor?
Just one comment, and not on the presentation, you certainly have a right to that, is that regardless of whose responsibility it is, or what the function or the different roles that different parties play, the amount that is presented in the budget as a result of the Board of Selectmen vote is the amount that is going to be necessary to do the full vow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Under which option is it the full amount for? Is it option 1 or option 2?
I don't know what you mean by option 1 or option 2. But
Well, I looked at the
full
RFP.
valuation.
I looked at the RFP today and the results that came back from that RFP, and the numbers are all over the board. I mean, depending on what services you want to purchase. There's a low bidder for option 1, which is, I think, $520,000, which
If
is
you want
not
to call
a...
that option 1, that's not the full value. That's not the full valuation. The full,
That's not, no, that's not the full data valuation, I
right,
think
the
it's
full
called.
data
It's- Yep.
valuation cannot be done, I won't say cannot be done, we always try to negotiate. But what I'm saying is that the number that's in the budget is a likely number to get a full data evaluation done, regardless of who's,
The second option B, a full data evaluation, I saw for over $1 million. I think it was $1.2 million.
it was up to 1.2, yes, sir.
Yep, 1.2,
Yes, sir.
which the 317 wouldn't even be anywhere near half of that.
All right, what I'm saying is, I hate to negotiate in public.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is,
Then
you
don't.
need the 820 to get it done, the 2 years, or the 370 plus the 50 times 2, or the 3, whatever it is, plus 50 times 2.
And I think the discussion that's going on here is actually a healthy discussion that needs to happen after the budget season. And I think that's what we're trying to do is, we want to make sure, A, we're fulfilling our fiduciary responsibility, whatever that may be, and we need the town attorney's help in adequately defining that. And B, since the last revaluation was so controversial in several areas of town, we want to make sure we're fully briefed on it. And I think that benefits all of us, not just us, but, the administration as well, to make sure that we are.
Yeah,
That's my position.
Yeah, I think that's everybody's positions.
Yeah.
I mean, I would suggest that, if you want to move things around, just move the whole amount into contingency, as opposed to cutting the 50 and then moving the remainder into
Well,
contingency.
the cut, I guess, is already approved, right? So we're talking about the remainder.
I was still crying over the prior cuts.
Go ahead, Mr. Tetra.
Yeah, the concern over the last reval is something that we've all dealt with.
Yep.
All right, and that's the reason for going back, looking at doing a full data collection, which, as was pointed out here at this board, hadn't been done since 1993. Doing the partials is basically the mail out and getting it back. All right, so we're talking about getting out there, doing everything we can to ensure that not only individual properties are done, but it also balances out by the neighborhoods in town. The issue in the last one was certainly one of that led to questions of equal distribution of the tax burden by neighborhood.
Yeah, right.
All right, so that's what we're trying to do. We also need to get started on that July 1st in order to finish on time. In order to get done by July 1st, we need to sign contracts on May 1st. We need to have the plan now is to have a vendor selection in April.
Of this year.
Yes.
Well, then we look forward to a rapid presentation, I hope.
Okay, so we've got a town attorney opinion that says it's basically appraiser's job to do that.
Yeah.
All right, so by not putting this money in, you're putting the appraisal at risk.
Well, I'll tell you from my standpoint, before I want to fully authorize the money, I need to know, I'd like to know what the difference is between all these things. I want to know that the town attorney, because he hasn't addressed one statute, there's a whole section on the general statutes regarding Board of Finances, and what the general statutes say regards to our role within the general statutes. Whether it's just, we look it over. but the numbers are so drastically different. And I understand we're buying two drastically different products. One's the full data, I understand what that is. And I would like to understand what other communities are doing. Like, why do you do full data versus a non-full data? Because it seems to be more than double the price. And I know
Tremendous amount more labor involved in doing that.
if people allow you into the houses.
Correct.
Yeah.
But you need to not.
I understand the people allow you into that will allow you into the house is like 25%.
And again, it sounds a lot like we're getting into the appraiser's job, which is to make that decision and decide what the best way is to make sure that we do the proper appraisal for everybody in town. And that's what we owe our residents.
We owe our residents that, but I'm going to have to be convinced as a Board of Finance member for spending the money that I'm getting some value from spending, instead of spending $520, that it's worth it to spend $1.2 million. And someone's going to have to convince me of that.
Nobody is recommending $1.2 million.
Okay. Well, you're
That's not-
suggesting
that's
some
not
number
the-
in the middle.
That's
right?
not the number before this board.
The number before the board right now is, what's the number, 317,200?
It's not even enough
Which
to
is,
do-
which is not enough to get started. You know, cutting the 50,000,
Well, how is
Us
that
is a real
enough to
problem.
get started?
It's not even enough to pay the lowest bid.
yes, it is.
Okay, 317 plus 50 is 367.
370. We had,
The lowest bid was 544.
520.
520.
$520,000.
now, Linda, you're going to have to run through those numbers again, because I thought we had more in than that.
374, but they're suggesting cut of 370.
Right, there was 374, plus what did
Use
the
the
Board of
mic,
Selectmen
please,
add?
Linda.
Linda, can you use the mic?
Excuse me for a second. The work takes 20 months,
No, I
or
understand.
24 months. So the amount times this year's, the three whatever, plus the 50, 374 plus 50 is 425, times 2 is 850.
Wasn't
It was
374.
It was
317 plus
317.
50.
No,
Plus
317 is after, yeah, it was 425, I thought, after the Board of Selectmen made their adjustment.
That's not the numbers we were given.
Not the numbers we have right here.
You received 317.
Linda, you need to talk into the mic.
I'm just curious.
The 317 number, I think, was the night we discussed all this.
317 too.
Yeah, Mr. DeWitt.
Quick follow-up while you're looking.
Well,
20 to-
not while they're questioning it.
No, just 20 to 24 months is what option?
All options.
All options. Really?
It's just a question of how
starts-
many people and how much
Just
work.
manpower?
Correct.
It's a process.
It is a process, yeah. It's a 2-year process.
But the full amount is the 417,000 is the full amount for fees and professional services. And it's my understanding that of that 417, 376 is the, in the budget book, the 376 of the 417 is for the appraisal.
I'm reading it right now off the tax report.
It's a total of 427 in the budget book.
Correct.
That 427 is a
Right.
piece of the reval and some other things, if you look at
Agreed.
the tax report, right.
So if you look at the difference year over year, it's 110 to 427. So maybe that's where everyone was getting the 317,200 was the result of the reval.
Yes, the actual number in the,
Speak into the mic, please.
the actual number was 378. Of that 427, 378 was earmarked for reval,
And what was the amount the Board of Selectmen added to that?
50,000.
That I
To
do.
the 378?
378, yes.
To make it for,
Well, actually added the amount to the fees and
Which had other,
services.
which
yep,
had
it's
other...
okay,
Go on,
I'm just trying to get to what it was for the reval.
No, it's for the reval. I guess I was $2,000 off.
Right.
The 428 is what's in there for the reval.
there for reval.
For this year. For the budget year, fiscal year 2015.
Is there anything else in fees and professional services for him for the year, for anything? Because what you're
Yeah.
basically saying is there's nothing there.
No, no,
Those
it was
$50,000.
no, it's 420, pre-Board of Selectmen vote, it was 376 for the revalve and about 50 for other items.
Right.
378, she keeps correcting me. I'm sorry.
Mr. DeWitt?
Well, we can go back to the real records, but my records, when asked, the tax assessor said, fees and professional services have been raised $317,200 for reevaluation. That was what I recorded.
And I watched that on Fair TV today, and that's exactly what he said.
That's raised, but that was not the cost of the reval.
His exact words, raised for reevaluation.
Correct.
So there's a number, 427, 200 was the
Right.
number we originally had before the Board of Selectmen. And the question was, I think I asked the question, well, how much of that's reevaluation? He says, oh, we've raised that number by 317 for reevaluation.
Raised it by that for reval is also a correct statement. That's just not the total cost of the reval. That's all.
Yeah, you're all familiar with the tax report, basically the document that the department heads submit with the detail, and I have it here, and basically it's very clear. I cannot remark on what Mr. Ross said and how it was understood, but it's very clear in the tax report of his budget request. $378,000 is requested for fiscal year 15 to fund the first 12 months of the revaluation project.
So what size contract are you going to sign? Let's assume that's the right number, okay? Let's assume the 317, I'll go on that, I understand the miscommunication or the misunderstanding, right? So let's get over that and say we are where we are, right? We're now, we have a motion before us for 317 to move it into contingency, okay? The 50,000's been reduced, that's been amended. How much is the revaluation going to cost in total?
Over 2 years,
Yeah.
approximately $850,000.
How do you sign a contract for that?
You have a year out to make sure that you have an out at the end of the year, as we've done in the past, to
Right.
make sure that we're not committed past that.
Right.
But there's an expectation that we would get there, and everybody on this side is aware that it's a 2-year agreement.
Right, but there's an out after the first year, so you're not
We're not committing the
basically
second year.
to it over the second year.
If the world came to an end and we didn't want to complete it, we would stop that.
When is the majority of the work completed?
Wow.
It's pretty
It's-
much 50/50. We did analysis, actually, when I say we, Mr. Ross and I don't remember which year it balanced on, but it's, even though there's more months of work in year one, there's a lot of intense work at the end of year
Right,
two.
that's right.
So it
And-
kind of
and-
balances.
Right, because
And
there's a
you're-
lot of, for lack of a better word, lower-level work in the
But-
first part,
Yes.
right?
But also-
And then analysis and all that. in the
That's correct,
second
Mr.
half.
Flair.
But year two also goes through February, March in terms of support during the
get it.
assessment appeal process.
Yeah, no, I get it, thank you.
Yeah.
I hear this cost, it's going to cost us $850,000. How does that jive between the two numbers we have for option 1 and option 2? Because one of those numbers is 520 for option 1, that's the lowest bidder. And the lowest bidder for option 2 is $1.2 million.
No, that's not correct. That's the highest bidder for option two.
Oh, it's the highest bidder?
That's the highest bidder.
So the lowest bidder for option 2 is $850?
Approximately correct.
Okay, that's where I was confused. So you're assuming that we're going to go at the highest level,
Full data collection.
full data collection. Is that a decision that's been made by Mr. Ross?
Correct.
He's recommending that,
Correct.
okay?
I'm not sure if formal decision we made until the contract is signed.
The first selectman just said he made a decision.
Right, I mean, a formal decision, legal decision is all I'm saying. But yes, everybody wants to do that.
Okay. But we've not had a presentation on why that's the best way and why we should fund it. Correct?
Correct. And how that's done is not a function of this board.
Well, I'll be sending some further questions to the chairman tomorrow for further legal opinions, plural.
can, but-
Opinions.
I mean, the
Okay.
board,
Holding up this process
Mhm.
is not in the best interest of the town.
It might not be in the best interest of the town, and it might be in the best interest of the town, Mike, because the way I see it is the last one that was done didn't really work out that well. And a lot of people have come to me and other members of this board to complain about it.
And this is not the only board they've come to.
Yeah, and they've come to you, and they've come to
Absolutely.
Kristen, and they've come to others.
Right.
And
that's
I
why
would like
there's-
to have a review of what this board's responsibilities, whether it's monitoring, whether it be whatever it is, to determine what our role is. And the question that was asked for the town attorney, and I'm sure he got asked that one limited question, was very limited. It was. It wasn't everything we'd asked him to do.
You know, I guess my recommendation would be, and because conversations go on until you have those reports and meetings, is if someone who voted for the $50,000 reduction could vote to have that reconsidered, you could put the $50,000 back, then you could put the whole thing in contingency, and then you could ferret it out between now and time to sign the contract.
Mr. Tetro, what's your thought?
The time is very short, all right, and that the town attorney has in fact rendered opinion. If you'd like some more background, we can provide that. But that money has got to get authorized on a fairly quick basis, like within weeks, for us to proceed as we're doing.
We're talking about a budget that we're about to approve where none of this money can be spent until July 1st.
Right.
Are we not?
The goal is to sign contracts by May 1st so the appraisal company can gear up for what they're doing because they have to allocate workers and such.
When does the RTM vote?
First Monday in May.
After May 1st?
I believe it's the
So the money's not appropriated before it's actually signed?
But yeah, we're binding the town to the full faith and credit of the town.
Now,
I think that's what we're about to hear.
we would do it certainly after that point.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
That's all,
make
but
sure.
that's a matter of a few days.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that because I
Yep.
didn't know.
The work
Because you said
plan-
May 1st like it was a hard date.
I did. The work plan has a May 1st date on it. Obviously, that would be adjusted based on when the RTM votes.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Alvin?
If those voting in favor of reducing the $50,000 would consider, or would reconsider that vote, which they can do, and restore that to the budget, and then move the full sum, including the number that you have now, 31720, if you were moving the full sum to contingency, where at least the town would in July be able to effectively commit to this work, sign contracts, I would be able to support that.
Thank you, Mrs. Alvin.
And otherwise, I will vote against moving the 31720 to contingency.
I'm going to go for a 5-minute recess, and then we'll get back and we'll follow up with this item. Okay? Yeah. Is Mr. Stone around? We're coming back into session here. All right. Mrs. Leclerc, you had a motion?
Okay, I'm going to make a motion to reverse my prior motion, to add the 50,000 back to line 53,200.
Do we have a second of somebody who supported that? I will. Okay, Mr. DeWitt seconds it. So we're reconsidering the amendment, and this time it would add back into the budget the $50,000 for the valuation that had been taken out. Any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor of adding it back in? Okay, those opposed? Okay, we'll add that back in. And now the 428.
One opposed.
Oh, one opposed, sorry. 428, thank you. Who's opposed? Mr. Mayor, what's the total amount?
$428,000.
428. Okay, Mrs. Leclerc, back to you.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to move from that same line, fees and professional services, 428,000, and move it to contingency.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. DeWitt, any other questions, comments on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of moving that number? Those opposed? None opposed? And that item is moved, and that is into the contingency account. So now the assessor's budget as adjusted is before us. Can we have that number, Mrs. Gardner?
$586,576.
586,576 for the assessor's budget is now before us. Thank you, Mrs. Gardner. Questions, comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor of that budget? Opposed? Abstentions? That budget carries. I want to thank Mr. Mayor and Mr. Tetro for walking us through the new information on that. Much appreciated. All right, tax collector's budget 3090 is before us for 581,018. That's 581,018, tax collector's budget. Any questions, comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Move that. Okay. Next budget is Information Technology, Department 3110, IT. This budget is as adjusted by the Board of Selectmen, $1,640,981. Gotta get glasses. Mr. Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to, that's on page 195 for IT. I would like to move line 53200, fees and professional services, down by 30,000, and line 56140, special department supplies, also down by 30,000 for a total of $60,000 reduction to the IT department. This one is very frustrating to sort of, once again, find myself in a position of wanting to reduce an area that I do believe in, and this really comes to, I think, again, a lot of just a failure in a plan in that department, a lot of frustration in the way that department is still being run. This is just year after year, we keep getting confronted by that. I find myself very frustrated there and believe that until we get into a better situation there, it's not worth throwing good money after bad, which is very disappointing, again, to find ourselves in this position.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. Brown. Comment, discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we're going to vote on the motion to reduce in information technologies fees and professional services, correct, Mr. Becker?
Yes, 53200, fees and professional services, 30, and 56140, special department supplies, 30.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. All in favor of those reductions? Opposed? Okay. Abstentions? Okay. Information technology is now back before us. Do we have the revised budget? Mrs. Gardner's quick over there. 1580981.
That's what I got.
The IT budget for 1580981 is now before us. Okay? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Board of Finance budget, 3130, 119,873. 119,873. Questions, comments on this budget? Bless you. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Unemployment compensation, 205,120. 205,120. Anyone? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That one passes. Okay, we are now into the public safety area of the budget. Public safety. Fire Department, $11,829,902. This is the fire department budget for $11,829,902. Mr. Walsh.
I would like to make a motion to reduce regular payroll by $15,000.
Do I have a second to that motion? Mr. DeWitt with the second. That motion is now before us for discussion.
Why?
Well, it has to do with, I'm glad you asked, actually. It has to do with just what happened with the deputy fire chief. And we have a salary in here for him of $127,863. So his salary will really be there for the first 6 months. And if I'm incorrect, Mike, tell me, but he will no longer be employed with us because the Fire Commission did not renew his contract, so he will be no longer with us on December 31st. When we've been hiring individuals, and I made a bunch of calls today about what deputy chiefs are making in the area. I've called Stratford, Bridgeport, Norwalk. Most of the deputy chiefs around, entry level, maybe a new one, would be making approximately between $90,000 and $100,000. So we'd be getting somebody in a lower, because, we've had the pleasure of, Deputy Chief Reed, who's a great guy. He's been having raises all along for 12 years. So just like other department heads and things that we've replaced, but there's a good chance, I guess, we'd probably having one of the assistant chiefs possibly move up or take the exam or whatever. But it has a snowball effect throughout the budget, because then we'll have to replace an assistant chief. And that assistant chief will come in at a first level, as opposed to probably somebody at a higher level. So there'll be a savings there. Then there'll be a lieutenant who now has to, who makes that way up, and then a regular firefighter will take over for lieutenant. It can have an echoing effect throughout the entire budget. $15,000, I think, is being extremely conservative on the total effect of the department. But it's going to have an effect. And I think I'd like to take advantage of that. So I'm making the motion to reduce it by $15,000.
And we had a second on that, right? Mr. DeWitt seconded that, I believe? Yeah.
I'm not quibbling with the $15,000, but do we have expenses with him his contract not being renewed, unemployment compensation or anything like that? I don't know.
I'll ask the CFO or the first selectman what they know about that. Do you know, Mr. Mayor? Does he have some type of package or something that we need to know about?
There's no package that I'm aware of, and I'm not familiar with his contracts, so I really can't respond to that comment directly.
Mrs. Alman?
Can we ask the first selectman? I mean, I'm looking out in the room, and the fire chief is not here, so we can't ask him, and I'm sure there's nobody from the commission here. I'm interested in your motion, Mr. Walsh, and so I would like more information as I consider it.
Sure. All right. There's no overall package. There would be some payoff for, I believe, vacation time and some items like that that are pretty typical within that range. But I don't know exactly what's in the bank to give you that number. I think that you're making a number of assumptions there that are pretty reasonable, by the way. I don't mean to suggest that. But if the commission were to choose somebody from outside, some of that domino effect wouldn't take place. So I think by using your more conservative number, that's not a bad way to go.
No, I thought I tried to use as conservative. I didn't try to get aggressive with it at all, to be quite honest with you. And I think there could actually be another 15.
Yeah.
But I did not want to go aggressive depending on, I don't want to influence clearly over-influence what they're going to pay, because that's not really my role. But as we move people up in the fire department, in my history of being involved in the town, this seems to be the way. We try to promote from within to some degree, and there's going to be a slot open where people are just going to be kind of generally moving up unless we hired somebody from outside.
Didn't mean to disagree with your math, just saying that it's based on hiring from in all the way through at every level and not bringing somebody in from the outside at any one of those. It's also assuming that the replacement comes from this, which is not an unreasonable assumption, but it is an assumption as part of that. That's all.
Yeah.
Mrs. Alban?
If my experience is helpful from other human resources requirements, they'll have to post this position, so they'll probably have applicants from the outside. But the number of 15,000 is not unreasonable, perhaps could be a little conservative, and for that, I will support your motion.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. Becker?
I would say I would certainly hope that it comes from within, being as that's one of the, I believe, driving reasons for not renewing the deputy chief's contract. I personally am not going to be in favor of this. I do understand the reasoning and can appreciate for any of my colleagues that do vote for it, certainly that you're working with the information that's kind of before you at this time. In my personal view, there's currently a petition out there. There's quite a number of people. I would say I would have thought the budget would have been the top item that I'd be asked in the last few weeks, but this is either the top or certainly right behind the budget. I'm actually shocked at how many people and how many phone calls and emails about what has occurred. And in my view, I'm hoping, quite frankly, to see a reversal on what occurs. There certainly is a ton of transparency issue in what happened that I think everybody here should be concerned about. So in my personal case, I'm certainly not going to vote to do this because I'm hoping that that contract's renewed and savings or not, that person continues in that job. They've done a stellar performance over the years and should be continuing on. It would be a detriment to our town otherwise. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion before us is to reduce the fire department budget by $15,000 on the salary line. All in favor? Opposed? Mr. Becker? Abstentions? None. That item carries. The fire department budget is now before us at $11,814,902. It's $11,814,902. How'd you like that math? That was pretty good, right?
Nice.
Round numbers. All right. All in favor of that budget? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Now, the police department budget is before us. That department budget is at $13,438,568, and that is an increase over, an increase by the Board of Selectmen of $214,418. That's $214,418 in that budget. Questions, comments on this budget? Mr. DeWitt.
Just a comment. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for adding the school safety initiative to this budget. I want to thank the chief and Dr. Title, who's not here, and the first selectman for adding this. I think this was a great addition to the chief's budget, and I look forward to hearing about the progress of the team, and I am fully supportive of the budget as is recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Walsh.
I'm very interested to see how this all works out. I wish the police chief laid out a very good plan, I thought, and I have all the confidence in the world in him, and I think it's time to give him a shot with this. I will say, I mean, I'm not loving the fact that we're adding personnel, and this is probably going to be the only matter that I vote on tonight where I do give an additional member to the personnel, increase it. But I think we need to do something for school security. I think this will go a long way, and I'm interested to hear from Chief McNamara in about a year to see how it went.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Becker.
Briefly, yeah, no, I think if you go back and you look at last year, and I'm cognizant on the issue of increasing personnel, and this particular proposal this year came through with a lower head count and achieving the same, or maybe even better end goal. So I like what I see there. I'm certainly going to be in support of this budget and the school safety initiative as it's been laid out. And I'm certainly actually also happy about the IT position, and I hope that covers all of public safety. I brought that up a little bit earlier. I think that'd be great, but I think that gets another officer out. I think it was a creative plan to really enhance a number of areas for public safety and school safety in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. With that in mind, before I turn it over to a vote, I'd like to thank the police department, and I believe the fire department was somewhat involved as well, right, or no? and the Board of Education and Dr. Title and his crew for putting the plan together. Mr. Tetro, thank you for your involvement as well. I would ask that next year, to the extent possible, Chief, when you guys give your budget presentation, I'd like a report back on this and see actually what are the benefits of this plan, what has happened, what can we speak to that are tangible related to this, so that we'll understand how that this money was well spent and that it is in fact going towards school safety. And I know, I speak for my colleagues and we look forward to the discussion. I don't say that a lot, but we look forward to the discussion on the infrastructure improvements, not just in the schools, but also in the town side buildings where we have to keep our employees safe, and your Board of Finance safe, I think would be helpful, and most appreciated. So those would be my comments. Anybody else have anything? With that, the budget is before us for $13,438,568. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. Okay, I'm going to ask, unless there's grave reasons why not, I'm going to ask that we do one vote on animal control, street lighting, hydrant water services, emergency management, and the ECC. So let me just read the numbers on that are before us. Is anybody opposed if I do that? Okay. So animal control is 408,948. Street lighting is 675,483. Hydrant and water services is 1,690,232. Emergency management is 56,541. And the ECC is 1,511,247. Okay. Any questions, comments on any of those budgets? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Those budgets carry. Thank you to our public safety team. Now go to Public Works, and we'll go to Public Works Administration first, which is Department 5011, 489,684. 489,684. It's the Public Works Administration budget. Okay, no questions, comments? All in favor of this budget? Opposed? Abstentions? That budget carries. Public Works Operations. This is $14,104,343. $14,104,343. And any questions, comments, concerns on this budget? And what is everybody laughing at? Okay.
Come on, share, Mr. Barr.
Yeah, no.
No, it's just funny when you brought up DPW, I was like, oh.
Oh, okay.
Little fun, that's all.
Okay, that's going to cost you. Who makes the first cut?
Brown pissed off.
Mr. Brown.
Now, this is not because of your, whatever you're doing back there. I'd like to make two motions, and just to point out, the motions will be to reduce this budget. I did have an opportunity to talk to Mr. Michelangelo and Mr. Bartlett about these reductions, and we reviewed them together. And to anticipate a future question of why, the simple answer is to reduce the budget. And I remind everybody that we did pass a bonding resolution earlier in this budget process to increase the equipment that the Department of Public Works so desperately needed. So, with that said, I'd like to go to line 57000 and turn your attention to three items in capital outlay, which you can find starting on page 247. If you can look at number 4, the first part of this motion will be to reduce the supervisor's SUV, a reduction of $27,500. If you go to item number 7, the brush bucket, in the same motion, it would be to reduce that piece of equipment for $18,000. And then number 8, the tire balance machine for $7,500 for a total of $53,000 in capital outlay.
So your motion?
That is, my motion is to reduce capital outlay. Item number, got it,
$53,000.
by $53,000.
Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. DeWitt? Discussion. Mr. Stone?
Yeah, I know you've discussed this, and the one question I have, and I had it before, when we reduced, like a car or a truck, whatever it is, it has 150,000 miles that we want to replace, and it's only 27,500 to replace it by, I assume, something in the fleet somewhere that we have. What I'm saying is, that Chevy Blazer with 150,000 miles will probably need repairs, which could cost, it could be a transmission, whatever. I mean, it's at the end of its useful life. And I just have a hard time cutting corners like that.
Okay.
The other equipment, I don't know what the Vera brush bucket does, to be honest with you, and the tire balance machine is no big deal. But when we start with the cars that have really, you know, when you have a car with that much mileage on it, and 1 million people have been driving it all these years, there's repair cost. And a newer car is more efficient, hopefully, and have less repair cost. So that's where I'm coming from.
On that point, I'll point to the First Selectman's budget increases maintenance and repair automotive by $25,000 or 7% year over year.
You also have to assume that they're going to repair it. We talked about this vehicle and talked about other options that the Department of Public Works has, and one of those options is to share a car with another department, possibly the police department. And they can utilize that vehicle in lieu of this vehicle.
It's possibly shared with the police
No,
department.
that's what he said. I'm
Oh,
going by the
okay.
department
Yeah,
head.
all
We
right.
had, like I said, we had a discussion,
Yeah.
and that was part of the discussion.
Who do you want to come up?
Could they come up and address these items?
Absolutely. Come on up, gentlemen. Sorry for the lateness of the hour. At least it's not snowing. Rain.
No, we appreciated the opportunity to discuss these ahead of time. This way we had a few hours to prepare and go through our budget. This way we're doing it in the comfort of our offices instead of here. So it was tough identifying items where we would cut. For this particular vehicle, we have 2 of them that are identical. One is the tree warden's vehicle, the other is the building maintenance ones, and they're beat-up Chevy Trailblazers. But in lieu of getting a new vehicle, the employees will continue to drive the same vehicles. If for any reason they won't continue and we can't keep limping along, we'll use the a hand-down Crown Victoria from the police department, just like Scott drives as his vehicle. His vehicle probably has 95,000 miles on it. Not ideal for a public works type vehicle, but yes, we could get along with it. And in our entire budget, we are the ones that came up with that suggestion. So we were given the opportunity to go over everything. That is one that we offered up.
Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, and then I'll go to Mrs. Alvin.
You know, it's an idea to think about, and I don't know, and you'll have to talk to the first selectman, because I just don't know where the pressing budget needs is, but Mr. Mayor, thank God, was wrong with his extra storm that he thought we were going to have and built $100,000 into some of the numbers.
Storm and a half.
Storm and a half. And knock on wood, we didn't even have the half a storm, thank God. And do you think that you might end up your budget year in the black because of that?
No, we saved some. You know, March did not turn out, I don't think there was any storm events at all in March, so that
Yep.
helped quite a bit.
Yep.
But I wouldn't say we'll be in the black because of one good month of March. But once the third quarter, you know, the third quarter numbers, then I think we'd be in a better position to talk about the current fiscal year.
Because maybe there'd be, if you did have money at the end of the year to discuss maybe using some of that to buy a vehicle, if there was enough, before the end of the year.
Well,
If you're lucky enough and if your numbers hold.
I don't think there'll be money left at the end of the year.
There won't?
No.
What happened to that extra 100, a storm and a half
Storm
money?
and a half.
Can you tell me what happened
Remember,
with
there's
the...
already a negative in the line.
It's already over budget.
Okay.
We'll go to Mrs. Albin.
On the other two items, the Vera brush bucket, and is this a new piece of equipment,
Well,
or is it to replace something?
it's, we have other ones of these in-house. So the feeling was that, we have 3 of them existing, and the backhoes serve a similar type purpose. So these are to collect items on roadside, even though we did need that one, we do need one, that's why we did put it in the budget. When we looked at the overall picture and what could we get by with, we made the decision that with our existing 3 Versa buckets and our backhoes that serve those function, we could get away without a new one for this
So
year.
we can anticipate seeing this next year?
Well, possibly sometime in the future, correct?
Okay.
Next year.
And the tire balance machine?
Scott?
We currently have a used one donated from the police department, and if that fails, the theory would be that we would sub out that part of the service.
Okay. If you have to sub it out, will it cost more than the price of purchasing a new machine?
No, it should not, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. McFadden.
Does the police department still have one that you could borrow?
I don't really think it's an item quite like you can borrow it. I mean, it's a fairly heavy item that's secured to the floor.
Okay.
But I suppose, in theory, we could take a few tires on rims up there and balance them and bring them back if it came down to it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, the motion is before us to reduce the capital outlay items by $53,000. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions. Okay, the budget is back before us for Public Works operation.
One more motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown?
I'll put these items together. On item number 53200, fees and professional services, make a reduction of $15,000 in that line item. On line item 54330, maintenance, repair, automotive, make a reduction of $10,000. On 55300, communications, a reduction of $4,000, and on 55600, a reduction of $1,000, which is a total of $30,000. And again, it's a discussion that I had with Mr. Michelangelo and Mr. Bartlett. So, motion before us is to reduce those line items for a total of $30,000.
Do we have a second? Mr. Walsh? And now this item is before us.
Can you run through those items one more time?
Sure.
53200 by $15,000. 54330 by $10,000. 55300 by $4,000. 55600 by $1,000.
Any other questions, comments, concerns on these items? Mrs. Albin? Mr. Stone?
If we can reduce these all of a sudden, why were they put in at this rate to begin with?
Keep in mind, it's not a question that we want to reduce, and we're working with the town who's trying to match a budget number for taxation. So when asked, where can we reduce? No, in the perfect world, I wouldn't like any of these items cut, but being a team player and trying to help the town match its goal, these become areas that we can live with.
And I'd like to point out, if I could, that that's the conversation that we had. When we were on the phone and we were discussing this budget, they weren't saying, hey, you know what, I do have some fluff in this budget, why don't you take this? It was about cooperating, it was about working with the Board of Finance and the town in seeking ways to reduce this budget and reduce the tax burden on the Fairfield taxpayers. That's what the conversation was about.
Mrs. Alvin?
I'd just like to follow up either to Mr. Michelangelo or to Scott. So with $15,000 less, what will you not do in fees and professional services?
We'll have the opportunity to do some of that in-house is all. I mean, we have other staff like in engineering we can rely on. If I have to do a soil test, yes, I have a private sector I can go to for that, but I can also do some of that by dealing with our engineering department. So like any other thing, we'll have to take a business approach. Where are we? How busy are the crews? And, you know, what gets done first, or what gets done privately, or what gets done in-house.
Okay, I could probably explore that further, but I'll move to my next question. Maintenance, repair, equipment, what will you not be doing?
Well, again, it's not a question. I can't forecast which truck is going to blow a transmission or which truck's going to need a repair. One of my best managers in terms of executing the budget is Jeff Cornwall, our equipment manager. I sat with him after Jim's call, and again, he would like the money to stay in, but he was understanding, and he'll watch it, and he'll come in on budget.
How close to the line do you run that line item?
I think we're always fairly close with it. I mean, again, in a given year, we might be slightly over, in a given year, we might be slightly under, but we always take the burden of responsibility that if we're over on one account, we will go under on another to balance our budget.
The 4,000 in communications?
Again, what we'll do there is, the few years that we had an uptick on that was when we went to a new banding procedure and we had to do a new antenna. Based on those things being in place and hopefully some good luck, we won't have a lot of repair. That's essentially repair money for the two-way radios and portable radios that the crews use. But I'm pretty comfortable with that reduction.
Okay, and the laundry and linen?
That was basically the beneficiary of a better bid that came out, and we were able to encumber a little money on the, you know, as soon as we saw that, we encumbered money at a better price, therefore it transferred into a likely deduction for the $1,000.
Otherwise, you don't want to stand next to Scott on Fridays.
So with that information, I would ask the mover and seconder of this motion if they would separate these four out. I may be able to support some of them.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
We can do that. Why don't we do one at a time? And any other questions or comments?
My only comment is, I to both you gentlemen, Joe and Scott, you guys are being team players, and I can't tell you how refreshing it is to sit up here as a political figure, as an elected official, representing people and trying to save money, whatever. And I know that you guys always put together an honest budget, and we had to come to you last year, and I know I had that conversation. And the one thing I always know when I come to you guys, and I think Jim could probably affirm that with him having to come to you this year, is that you always give an honest answer. And there's nothing more than we can expect from our town employees. I think we're blessed in this town with department heads who do a really good job, but you guys affirm that every year by working with what you have, by always trying to find the town savings. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and I think the whole town appreciates that. That when we're in a tough bind, which it's a tough budget year again. I mean, they've been a lot of tough budget years, but this is another one that you've been able to step up and try to work with the town. So I just want to thank both of you for that. It's very refreshing, okay?
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Mr. Walsh, and I agree 100%, and I hope I stated that. I mean, just real quick, we made a phone call, the two gentlemen called me back, we reviewed this budget, it wasn't done in 30 seconds, we went through these items, and this is what we came up with, all in the spirit of reducing the burden of the tax that will commence in June. So that's what this was about. July, sorry. 5.3, yeah, we don't want the increase to come a month sooner, do we? 53200, my motion to reduce line item 53200, fees and professional services, by $15,000.
Okay, all in favor of this item?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
No, I missed it. I'm for it. I was thinking of something. Okay. 5-4.
Jim's for all of it, but no.
Right. Item 54330, maintenance and repair. My motion is to reduce this line item by $10,000.
And we have the same seconder as last time. So we'll go, Mr. Walsh. All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Motion to reduce line item 55300 by $4,000.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Line item 55600, my motion is to reduce that line item by $1,000.
All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Was that the one that was the one that was unanimous, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I never
Gentlemen.
felt so good about being cut.
Yeah. Gentlemen, I want to echo my colleagues' comments, not only for your work with us on the budget, but also I don't know if everyone fully appreciates how much hard work you guys do during the course of storm season and how you always come through for us. So thank you for that. And please extend our thanks and appreciation to your teams that are out there doing the work as well. So thank you. Any other comments, questions on this budget? Seeing none, Mrs. Gardner, can we have the revised figure?
$14,021,343.
$14,021,343 is the budget now before us. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Now, on the efforts of time, unless I hear something different, I'll ask that we vote one time for both the building department and engineering. Building department is 607,022, and engineering is 650,363. Questions, comments on these budgets? Seeing none, all in favor of these budgets? All opposed? Abstentions? We're done with those budgets. They passed. Okay, so we're almost on the last page. We see the end in sight. Here we are in Health and Welfare Services. The Health Department. The recommended budget is $2,741,940. That's $2,741,940. The Health Department budget, 6010.
6010.
Do we have any motions or comments on this budget? Mr. Walsh?
I'm making a motion to remove the 3 new part-time nurses.
Okay, what's the,
For 58,000. No, wait a minute, hold on one second. Total would be a reduction of salary of 58,276.
and is there something else?
Then there's I don't know if there's any associated Social Security that goes along with it.
Mrs. Gardner, can you get Mr. Walsh a number on that?
$845
$845?
for the major med portion of Social Security.
You're going to have to speak into the mic, we can't hear.
$845 for FICA.
$845. So, Mr. Walsh, you want to remove both?
Yeah. And it's not that I don't see a need, it's the problem is that I'm just not trying to add head count this year. It's just, the only, as I said earlier, the only head count I wanted to add was in regards to the school security, and I understand and I thought that the department, Sam's made a great presentation. I just do not want to add to head count with this economy.
Do we have a second to Ms. Walsh's motion? That's Mrs. Leclerc for a second.
Not a second, a question.
You, yep.
Could we ask Mr. Cleary, and I apologize,
Ryan.
right, Mrs. Ryan, to come up. I seem to recall that these positions were being added because of new requirements by state statutes for health issues in schools, and I'd like some more information about that.
Thank you. Please come on forward. And thank you, and my apologies for the lateness of the hour.
It's quite all right. So regarding that particular question, yes, there were two legislative changes that have impacts, not solely on nursing, but on school districts throughout the state. The impact directly for us is that the 504 legislation, which is one of the many types of meetings that the nurses participate in, has changed, making more students eligible for 504 plans, and so thus increasing the number of plans we have to develop, the number of meetings they have to attend, the number of emergency plans they have to develop, the number of emergency drills they have to do, the number of field trip training they have to do. So every time there's a new kid, there's several trickle-down effects of that. In addition, the other legislative change was a change to the homebound legislation, which requires the nurse to have dialogue with the physician regarding the conditions upon their reasons for their ability to stay home and receive homebound benefits in that regard. So it's another aspect that pulls the nurse away from the primary duty of planning for kids with special medical needs within that school, and in addition to the episodic care that is a part of their daily experience there.
As a follow-up, when did this legislation go into law?
Was it a few years ago? Year and a half ago, but it's the type of thing that's ramping up. It still hasn't really hit its full stride yet, and what happens with this type of thing is more and more, as more and more kids become eligible and more parents become aware that their children are eligible for this, they're taking advantage of that. And in addition, once it happens, then it's typically an annual type of thing, that the plan has to be reviewed and revised and updated, and more meetings every year to accommodate for that child.
And so how has that, as you've experienced this, as it has been put into practice, and as you say, it's ramping up, impacted your staffing?
Well, and it goes
Your
back
current staffing?
It goes back to the discussion that we had in terms of, we're seeing just the number of, in regards particularly to the legislation, we're seeing the number of meetings that are required, that the nurses participating in, going up dramatically. I think the number I mentioned before was a year-over-year increase of 47% increase in the number of team meetings at the high school and middle school level.
Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just, we've talked a lot about plans, and when we asked for these positions, it really wasn't, we really gave it a lot of thought. And I think one of the considerations when you talk about staffing health offices is consistency in staffing. We are seeing the need, and we are trying very hard to fill it in all different ways, moving staff from one building to another, moving staff out of my office, sending the part-time admin person we have over to a school. So we're making it happen, but what I'm seeing is the less consistency you have in staffing, the less efficient it is, the more impact it has on communication. And I think the positions would make the offices run a lot more efficiently and service students in a better way.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Walsh?
So this new legislation, when Governor Malloy and the legislature passed it, they didn't give you any funding for it, right?
Oh, no.
No. So this is really another great unfunded mandate that we get from Hartford, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, they pass this stuff and require it, and then pass it down to the town and expect us to pay it.
Yes,
right?
essentially.
That's great.
And Mr. Walsh, I can appreciate your desire to be fiscally conservative this year, as I hope I've demonstrated over the last several years.
You always have, Sans, and that's not the issue. I understand, and it's hard for me to make this motion because yours is you're another one of the great department heads we have, where you're always honest with your budget, and anytime I ask you a question, you're always willing to try to help or try to save money. So it makes this very difficult for me, I will tell you.
And this is a hard ask for us. We know it's tough, and as I tried to express before, is we waited, and we've been patching and doing things, and we're at a point where we feel we at least have to ask. We at least have to ask because it's about that team approach, about having a coordinated team in a nursing office, particularly at the high school level and middle school levels, where the staff needs to know the kids, because 2 kids presenting with a stomach ache can be 2 different types of things depending on the child. And so, it's about knowing the staff, being able to effectively communicate, and by reducing this or eliminating or it's really putting us in a position where we're patching things together to make it work. We're pulling in people from other buildings that don't know the kids to meet a need. For example, when a screening is going on and we have to screen a bunch of kids, we're patching things in and trying to fill in, and it really is not a desirable way to provide a consistent service to these children.
I think, are you all set? Did you want to speak?
I will, or...
Okay, let's go to Mrs. Albin, then we'll go to Mr. DeWitt. I thought he had his hand up, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I will be supporting maintaining this staffing in the budget, and I would ask that the mover and the seconder might reconsider this motion. Up to now, I have $955,800. My numbers may be off by a few. Mrs. Gardner will have the more exact numbers that we've reduced this. Am I off, Mrs. Gardner?
Gotta be off significantly.
Significantly.
Way off.
Well, then I've added...
Just a little bit under 530,000.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
okay,
almost
then
double.
somewhere I picked up some money. But even at that, I'm sure you'd like
Go for
that.
it.
I'm sure you'd like that. Probably an addition should have gone in differently. Anyway, you have over $500,000 that right now you've taken out of this budget so far, and I would just think that while the efforts are to bring the numbers down, sometimes it could be short-sighted, and I think this is one of those areas where the staffing is important to maintain. So I'll be voting whichever way that is to maintain that staffing.
Thank you, Mrs. Albin. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Walsh stole my thunder a little bit, but I was going to start by saying Mr. Cleary is another one of our team players for sure, and we had a discussion 2 days ago. And I think it would be beneficial for you to share what we spoke about and your possible thoughts on a reduction.
Yeah, our discussion, when asked, if you had to come to an alternate position with this, Joanne and I spoke a couple times and crunched some numbers and looked at it, and while it doesn't achieve the desired state. If we had to make a reduction, and you asked me which of these positions would go, we would look at reducing one of the 2 health aides. And just to be clear, it's not 3 nurses, it's 2 health aides, which is a lay person with first aid training, the lowest kind of cost we could bring into this, and 1 nurse. We would look to reduce one of the health aides. When we talk about having a plan, Joanne met with the coordinators, but met with every nurse in the middle school and high school level to talk about how can we best address this need that you all have in the most cost-efficient manner. And that was the directive to them, and this is what they came back with. And it's a cohesive plan that these 2 health aides are stationed at each high school, and they're part of the team that gets to know the kids, gets to know the nuances that go on every day in those offices, and helps with that, facilitating that communication. So there's a very robust situational awareness about what's going on with those kids in those schools at any given day, because it varies dramatically on every given day and every given week. There's things going on, and they all need to be aware of that, and this is part of the approach to it. While we wouldn't desire to see any of this reduced because it changes the plan, we go back to fragmented with one of these coordinators bouncing between 2 high schools trying to get to know 2,500 kids or so. It doesn't achieve the desired goal, but again, if that's the decision of this board, we will make it work.
And if I may...
Thank you both.
And if I may, when I spoke to Mr. Cleary, what you like to hear when you talk to a department head is not when you say, what can you cut? And you go, I'll give it to you. No, we talked for 45 minutes, and he spoke to Joanne, and we had a discussion later. So this seems like a team approach, and Mr. Cleary also, made it very clear to me the nurse is actually going to support the new nurse of the 3 is going to support all the middle schools.
That's correct.
So it's a shared responsibility. And the 2 health aides would have been one at each high school, but now it'll be a shared responsibility. So I am supportive of Mr. Cleary, and I don't know your last name, I'm sorry, Joanne.
Joanne. She's our nursing supervisor.
Thank you.
Trying to stay with the data.
I'm supportive of a reduction of 1 head per Mr. Cleary's direction.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
What I don't understand is when the first selectman starts the budget process and he asks the department heads, to have as lean a budget as possible, and they say it is, and then they come here and we ask them if we can reduce something, and they say, well, not really, but okay, we can do it. And it bothers me that this isn't done at the very beginning, because what happens is the first selectman puts out a budget of 2 point whatever it was, then we reduce it $500,000 or $600,000, and it could have been the first selectman that reduced it at the beginning. And I just, it just bothers me that it isn't done at the very beginning. I know it's a process and it has to go forward, and all this has to be discussed, but I just don't want to see, and this is political, but I just don't want to see those red signs next year when there's an election that's saying one party reduced the budget, because that bothers me.
I'm trying to digest what you just said.
And if I could, just, the fallback position, if you will, or the reduction, was a request of us. Our request was for 3 part-time positions. That's what we feel we need to address the current situation at our high school and middle school levels. I was specifically asked by Mr. DeWitt, if you had to lose one of these 3 positions, which one would it be? And that was the question put to me, and that's why the reply came. But to answer your question, I feel we need, and Joanne and I feel we need all 3 positions to really address the current situation that we're experiencing in our high school and middle school levels.
So why aren't you fighting harder for it?
I think I am. I think I've said several times tonight that the plan that was developed was for 3 positions to address the need. That's our desire, that we have it's a team approach to address the need in all 3 schools, that's what we would like. But a question was put directly to me, if we had to reduce one of these, which one would it be? I responded to that question, as I'm obligated to do.
Mr. DeWitt, go right ahead.
I'd like to share one other piece of the discussion I had with Mr. Cleary. We could have been having this discussion about these 3 nurses 2 or 3 years ago. But because of the budget situation we were in, we did not have that discussion. I shared, and this is personal opinion only, with Mr. Cleary, and I said, next year, put it in again. We have to keep considering this. This is a negotiation. Bob, you sell real estate. I'm sure the first time somebody walks in, that first number never is the right number, never is the final number. This is the same thing. So please, next year, Joanne, come here with 3 nurses, and we will have this discussion again, because it just shows the fact that you need it. You need it, you need it, you need it.
And if I might, and I'll state it one last time, our request is for 3 positions. We hope that you meet that. We'd appreciate that. We understand the tough fiscal times, and we've been a lean budget, and if you look at my budget from 2008 and the line items that I have control over, we're under almost this amount from 2008 to now. So we're essentially coming to here and saying we're at a point where we feel we have to ask for this.
I think the taxpayers, you being one, appreciate your stepping up with this one reduction.
Thank you.
I want to address the earlier comment, well, because I just think that has a chilling effect on the department heads, and I don't think that's a position we ever want to put department heads in. I think that when any of us call, we're all trying to do what we believe is in the best interest of the town. And in fact, we reach out to department heads that we know we can work with and can have these conversations with. So I don't ever think that's a poor reflection on a department head, or quite frankly on Mr. Tetro and the work he did on the budget early on. I think circumstances change, better information becomes available, a question is asked in a different way, we're looking for savings, and you know we're looking for savings, and it's a cooperative, collaborative approach. And far from being a sign of weakness or a sign of gamesmanship, I think it's just an inevitable part of the process. Otherwise, why are we here? So quite frankly, I commend you for that, and I think that shows well on you and the way you run your organizations, both of you. And I say the same to DPW and all the rest of them. And I say the same to Mr. Tetro, because I know what he went through earlier on in his budget process, and I know he went line by line. So I just have a fundamentally different view on it. So thank you for the candor. Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy.
Go ahead. Ladies first.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Finance. And these are difficult discussions, and I know that any motions that are made, specifically in this area, are not made lightly. I just want to add 2 points of information and emphasize part of the presentation that was made by Mr. Cleary and Mrs. Ryan when they came before us, which was about the National Association of School Nurses standards. And what I wrote down in my notes was that the levels where we are now leaves us liable. And that this request closes the gap somewhat, but not all the way. So in other words, this request this year for 3 partially closes that gap. It does not take us to where we actually need to be. Another fact that I recorded during that presentation was that the visits for medication have gone up 40%. And this is a concern for me, particularly, as you all know, in the Fairfield Cares work and what we know about the increased risks with our young people and prescription drugs. I really ask for your support for this motion, and I, again, recognize the difficulty of the conversation and adding headcount.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McCarthy-Vehy. I'm going to go to Mr. Walsh.
Since I know you want the 3. You've always said you wanted a 3. Matter of fact, you actually said you should get 3 full-time when you first started your budget discussions before us.
Well,
That's what you really wanted.
That would meet the standard of the
Yes.
National Association of School Nursing.
So I understand it. But I appreciate your candor that you've had with Mr. DeWitt, because I'm sure between my 0 and his 2, you'd rather his 2.
Of course. It's...
So,
I understand.
and these are
Taking bets on
and these are the tough decisions that we have to sometimes have with department heads, and it's the same discussions we've had with the people before you with Public Works, where, and a lot of times, if you know we're going to cut, you could help guide us with that, because I might give you a cut that completely doesn't work for your department, whereas you can guide me to help better manage a cut. I think that we saw that last year with the Public Works Department in regards to contracted services, where I was going to cut contracted services, and they said, no, we'd rather actually not have 2 guys and have some of the money be in contracted services. You get more bang for your buck. And that's really what we ask for sometimes. So I understand these discussions change. I understand, and you've been extremely clear that you wanted 3 people. So I don't think you've ever been fudging that number. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So the motion is before us. It's a reduction of $58,276 in salary and $845 in FICA. And that is for eliminating all 3 positions, new positions. All in favor of that motion? 1. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that motion fails. Okay, so the original Health Department budget is still before us. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I make a motion to reduce 1 health aid with a reduction of this budget of $15,233.
Do I have a second to that motion? Mr. Brown, do I have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor of reducing this budget by, what was
Oh,
it?
I apologize. I probably don't have FICA in there, sorry. 221.
How,
So
say it again?
I didn't include FICA.
Okay.
221, so I'll amend my, motion is to reduce the budget by $15,454 and reducing one health aide. Sorry about that, Mr.
Okay, not a problem, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I have the right numbers. So,
Yep.
the motion before us is to reduce the Health Department budget by $15,454, which means to imply the costs associated with one new health aide. Questions, comments? All in favor of this motion? Those opposed? 2. That motion carries. So can we get the revised budget?
The revised budget is $2,726,486.
For what?
486.
$2,726,486 is the revised budget before us. Questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all in favor of this budget? Those opposed? This budget carries. Okay. The next budget before us is 6050, Human and Social Services. Thank you very much. We're sorry for the lateness of the evening, and you have a good night, and thank you for the presentation. Human and Social Services, this budget is $554,598. $554,598. Any comments, questions on this budget? Mr. Walsh?
Make a motion to reduce this budget by $30,435, plus, I guess, whatever FICA would be applied, basically removing the Board of Selectmen's part-time senior director.
Do we have a second to this motion? We do not have a second to this motion. This motion fails. Okay, so the budget is back before us at $554,598. $554,598. Questions, comments on this? Seeing none. All in favor of this budget? All opposed? Mr. Walsh, this budget carries.
7-1.
So the Board of Selectmen's budget moves forward with the the part-time senior center director. Okay. Item number 6070, solid waste and recycling. The number here is $3,644,579. That's $3,644,579. Questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions. This item carries. Okay, we're into cultural and recreation. The library, 7010, $3,649,039. $3,649,039. Questions, comments on this budget? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions, this line item carries. Penfield Pavilion Complex, 7030. Penfield Pavilion, 67,396. I actually had occasion to speak with Mr. Lombardo on his budget. And in speaking with him, he came back with some revised numbers based on Penfield Pavilion's availability. And he indicated that he thought that highly likely that he was over budget by about $8,000 related to salary for Penfield Pavilion that would not be incurred due to the opening date of it. So it's an $8,000 reduction. I did ask him if that would impact revenue at all, and he said no, because he wasn't counting on it being rented out during that period anyway. So this is just an $8,000 reduction. So I would move that within Penfield Pavilion Complex, we reduce the salary line by $8,000. Do I have a second to my motion? We'll take Mrs. Leclerc. Yeah.
What staffing would he, I mean, obviously, if it's
Yeah.
not open, but what staffing had he built in anticipating that it was open that he won't be using?
It was just a part-time staffing of the pavilion itself, locker room, that kind of thing. And he just said if it's not open, they're not going to need those people. He doesn't believe that it's going to be open for a short period of time, so he could take $8,000 out. We didn't get into specifics. This was his, let me be very clear, this was his number. Mr. Becker?
Just if there's a FICA number we can tie to that, maybe? I don't
No,
know.
I wouldn't
Just
say
leave
I
it.
would just take it. It's a very small seasonal,
Okay, just,
yeah. Okay, this is before us. $8,000 reduction in salary in Penfield Pavilion. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That item carries. So, quick math, $59,396. $59,396 is the new budget for Penfield. Questions, comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, abstentions, that carries. Park and Recreation, 679,310. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries. Waterfront and Marina, 401,578. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries. Okay, let's do the golf courses together unless anyone disagrees. Carl Dickman, 259,144, and the H. Smith Richardson, 144,837. Questions, comments on these two? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Okay. Board of Education is done. Retiree benefits, $16,803,205. I just want to confirm this ties to our latest and greatest best estimates, fully funding the applicable ARCs, OPEBs, actuarial analysis, and best available information we have.
Yes, it does.
Okay. $16,803,205. Questions, comments, concerns on this item? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay. And that brings us to debt service, which is $26,109,686. $20,109,686. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. As I stated before, I appreciated the Board of Selectmen's full support of the school security team, but with an attempt to reduce the overall effect of any increases this year, I would like to reduce this budget by $256,100. And to preempt the inevitable question, for two reasons. One, after this reduction, we'll still have approximately $300,000 left in the debt service, and as we talked about
premium, you mean?
In the premium, excuse me, my bad. And as well, I think we have a positive outlook for our bond sales, as we discussed earlier this evening.
Questions, comments, concern? Well, first of all, do we have a second to that motion? Thank you.
I'll second it.
Mr. Walsh. Questions, comments, concerns from board members on this item? Mr.
Mayor, comment on this?
Absolutely.
The money is there, the money is available for use. It doesn't violate any regs or laws or rules, and if we don't use it this year, we'll use it next year.
And we do have a bond sale at the end of this year, right, which presumably...
The beginning of next year.
Beginning of next year, presumably, that's that whole June, July thing, which presumably we'll probably get some bond premium savings on that.
Certainly a possibility.
Thank you.
So I take it you're comfortable with this cut?
Yes, sir.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, all in favor of this reduction? Those opposed, abstentions? Okay, that concludes going through our budget on a line-by-line basis. There's some calculation to do, and while they do that calculation, let's go to Water Pollution Control Authority, WPCA. We do have a transfer to take care of, much like we did on the town side. In fact, the exact same things. Utilities and electric fees and professional services, well, rather, it's fees and professional services and information technology, correct, Linda?
Yes.
So it's just a reclassification. No bottom line impact on this, correct? So to transfer within WPCA itself, $2,000 from fees and professional services to a newly created information technology line item. I make that motion. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. DeWitt. Comments, questions? All in favor of this? Those opposed? Abstentions? We're good. Okay, WPCA budget. WPCA budget before us is $5,259,258. Correct? Any questions, comments from board members on that budget? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? All right. We'll wait for a tally for the, please.
Okay. The town budget, the general fund budget, after all, yes, after all your adjustments, is 286,015,872, which is a 2.71% budget increase.
But that's impacted by, what else?
Okay, and then you have a little bit of revenue
Yeah.
also, and I'm going to do the other calculations on the tax increase. Just give me another minute.
Okay, so I want to know what the tax increase is, okay? So,
2.38.
so the tax increase is 2.38. $2.38. Okay, so we have to vote on the budget as a whole, make this official. Linda, we're comfortable with this number, 286,015,872. 286,015,872. All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? That budget passes unanimously. Do we have any other items we need to take up this evening?
No, just two comments, if I may.
Please.
The 238 obviously is subject to adjustment, the mill rate, which will incorporate any BAA adjustments and et cetera from the initial time. Second comment is, I want to compliment, it appears as though, with the exception of the IT cut, every cut was discussed with the department head. And I want to compliment the board on taking that course of action, and maybe next year we can shoot for 100% on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that. And I would like to extend our thanks and appreciation to the department heads, and in particular to the finance department, and all of you for your hard work and effort, and let you know that one of the most difficult decisions we made did relate to the finance department resource. That was a difficult discussion. Mr. Becker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would note, I recognized Mr. Mayor's sentiment there. While I did not this particular year attempt to contact him, the IT director, I can tell you that in years past, he's made very clear that picking up the phone and calling is something that he does not want to occur, and he will not discuss it. So I didn't even, quite frankly, go ahead and do that. I do recognize your sentiment there, and hopefully we can be at 100% in the future, though. So, thank you.
I'd like to extend my appreciation once again to fellow colleagues and board members. Thanks for all the hard work, late nights, the collegial attitude, the good humor. Thanks for all the support. This is a tough budget cycle yet again. Again, I would harp on, hope we have a strategic planning process and can discuss services and what services we should be providing and what we can continue to provide, and what the expectation is to provide them relative to cost, because that's the only way we're going to continue to try to control these types of increases. Mr. Walsh?
I would second that comment by you, Mr. Flynn. We had that same conversation last year at the end, and nothing's happened in a year on it. I would hope that that conversation would get spurred on before we come to this table next year.
Thank you. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Alvin, seconded by Mr. DeWitt. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Good night, everybody.